Excellencies, distinguished guests, and colleagues both here at the United Nations Conference Center in Bangkok and joining us online, good afternoon. Welcome to this associated event of the 13th session of Asia-Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development, APFSD. Our theme today is Synergistic Practices to Addressing Environmental Challenges and Achieving the SDGs. My name is Nobue Amanuma. I'm a fellow at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, and I'm honored to serve as an MC. We face a triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, and it's increasingly evident that our conventional approach to addressing these issues by silo, one by one, is no longer viable, and it's important to tackle these issues synergistically. Today's event will draw insight from the forthcoming Asia-Pacific Synergy report to help shape an action-oriented agenda for our region through synergistic approaches. It also serves as an opportunity to collect insight from the audience to help shape this report. So your active participation will be much appreciated. Our program today is structured in a way that we start with a high-level strategy and move to practical implementation. And the first part will highlight the urgent need for synergistic approaches in the Asia-Pacific region from a high-level perspective. And following a brief break, we will reconvene for an extensive deep dive of what and how of synergistic approaches, featuring 2 rounds of expert panel discussions. The first round will focus on synergistic approaches from climate and health, biodiversity and nature positive, and pollution and circular economy, and cities and resilience, these 4 angles. And then the second round focuses on the means of implementation, specifically looking at how finance, data, and governance can enable and scale these solutions. We will conclude the day by synthesizing these dialogues into concrete policy recommendations for the region. So before we begin, I would like to share a few brief housekeeping items. We have allocated specific time for Q&A in the second part of the meeting after each round of expert panel discussions. So please raise your hand if you're on site. And for our online participants, please submit questions at any time using the Zoom Q&A function. And for those of you who are presenting today with slides, please let the Secretariat know when you move to the next slide so we can take care of that. To officially open our session, it is my privilege to introduce His Excellency Mr. Ishihara Hirotaka, Minister of the Environment Japan, who joins us via video message.
皆様こんにちは。日本国環境大臣の石原宏高です。イベントの開催にあたりご挨拶申し上げます。世界人口の 60% 以上が暮らすアジア太平洋地域では2030までの SDGs の達成が危ぶまれ、環境関連の目標に大きな遅れが見られています。SDGs の達成のためには、アジア太平洋地域の自然的、社会的条件を踏まえながら、気候変動、生物多様性の損失、汚染という3つの世界的危機に対する取り組みの間のシナジーを高めていくことが必要です。日本はシナジー促進の議論をリードしており、第6回国連環境総会に続き、第7回総会においてもシナジー促進決議を提案し、採択されました。昨年私も参加した COP30 で、グテーレス国連事務総長はパリ協定が交渉から実行段階へ移行したことを繰り返し強調していました。明日から始まるフォーラム SDGs 達成に向けた変革的行動の実践がテーマとなっています。我々は SDGs の達成に向けて今こそ行動を起こす必要があるのです。具体的な行動を起こすためには参考とすべき事例が必要です。日本国環境省は SCAP アジア開発銀行などと連携して有料事例、そこからの学びを織り込んだアジア太平洋シナジーレポートの作成を進めています。本日はこのレポートの作成過程で積み重ねてきた実践的な事例に基づく分析と、そこから見えてきたキーメッセージを紹介します。 そしてイベント参加者の皆様の議論を反映した上で、今年7月の SCAP 関係閣僚会議においてレポートを発表する予定です。このレポートがアジア太平洋地域の、そして世界の SDGs 達成に向けた実践の羅針盤となることを期待し、私からの挨拶とさせていただきます。ありがとうございました。
Thank you. I would like to introduce now Ms. Armida Arishabana, Executive Secretary of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific.
Excellency Mr. Doi Kentaro, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs of the Ministry of Environment Japan, Professor Takeuchi from IGES, distinguished speakers, colleagues and friends. Again, let me start by warmly welcoming you to this associated events of APFSD on these synergistic practices to addressing environmental challenges and achieving the SDGs. Again, as we know, across our region, Asia-Pacific, the triple planetary crisis, namely climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, is already reversing the hard-won development gains. Responding to these challenges requires synergistic approaches, and hence the theme of this session and also the upcoming report, integrating actions that deliver multiple gains simultaneously in a cost-effective way. And I'm also pleased to note that the momentum for synergy or these synergistic approaches is gaining momentum thanks to two resolutions adopted by UNEA. And also I'm pleased to note that the latest resolution specifically invites regional commission, including SCAP in this case, to facilitate multilateral and multi-stakeholder cooperation in line with nationally determined priorities. In this regard, I'm pleased to highlight the partnership with Ministry of Environment Japan as well as IGES for the preparation of the first Asia-Pacific Synergy Report that will inform deliberation at the 9th session of the Committee on Environment and Development, which will be convened at the ministerial level. This will be convened from 1st to 3rd July this year in Bangkok, and hopefully support the adoption of a regional action program on synergies for the region. And hence this important of the strategic importance of the report. So allow me, with that background, allow me to offer 4 action areas where synergy is already producing results and where we can scale impact further. The first one is by adopting an integrated climate action. Maybe this is easier said than done, but I think the direction should be towards integrated climate action. We increasingly see countries aligning mitigation, adaptation, and development within national policy framework to deliver climate ambition while strengthening resilience and development outcomes. So combine this together in an integrated manner. And since most member states have submitted their updated NDCs, it is time to further strengthen integrated climate action across different national plans for their net zero pledges. Secondly, promote nature-based solution. Restoring and managing ecosystems such as mangroves, watersheds, and urban green networks addresses multiple challenges at once, including mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity, as well as livelihoods. With 75% of regional GDP dependent on natural capital, nature-based solutions are not just an environmental imperatives, they are also a key or strategic essential for development strategy. Third, to combine climate and clean air action. Again, we are very much aware, this air pollution is one of maybe one of the biggest challenge in our region. Just, we are also in the part of the region where air pollution is a really, really big challenge. This is due to this, the ongoing, long-standing impact of the use of fossil fuel combustion, inefficient energy system, and unsustainable land use practices. So cutting short-lived climate pollutants such as black carbon, methane, and tropospheric ozone delivers immediate health benefits and avoids substantial near-term warming. And fourth, the last one, is to advance sustainable urban development. Again, not only because of SDGs 11, which is SDG under review this year, but again, we know that cities are where synergies become tangible, integrated land use and transport planning, reducing emission and congestion, green-blue infrastructure mitigates heat and floods, circular system for waste and wastewater cut pollution, and data-enabled smart city platform help align services across water, energy, mobility, and health. So again, the strategic importance of urban or city focus on how to advance this sustainable development, turning complexity into more efficient and resilient urban system and livable communities. So again, to advance all these synergistic approaches, the four that I just mentioned, we must strengthen the system that enable them. This includes, again, this is already well understood, but just to reiterate again, the important points or emphasis on governance arrangement that connect sectors and levels of government. That's why local government is also key. Financing instruments that reward multi-benefit outcomes and data systems that make trade-offs visible and decisions actionable. So again, distinguished participants, excellencies, these are the 4 points that I would like to again convey to all of you. Hopefully this will be a valuable input to the ensuing discussion. So again, just to mention one more information, just to reiterate for all of you that already know this. Of course, we stand ready to support member states, and in this regard, we just would like to reinform or reiterate that we have these 4 platforms. First one is the regional platform, the regional platform supported by ESCAP. First one is Asia Pacific Regional Action Program on Air Pollution. I think we'll have event early March on this. Then the long-standing Seoul Initiative Network on Green Growth, the so-called SING. The third one is Regional Cooperation on Ocean-Based Climate Action. And the fourth one is Asia Pacific Localization Partnership for Sustainable Cities. So these are the 4 platforms that ESCAP have been convening and that provide a foundation for advancing this synergistic solution across the region by leveraging complementarities between countries and also collaboration among countries and stakeholders. In closing, I wish once again to extend my deepest appreciation to the Ministry of Environment of Japan for its long-standing commitment to regional cooperation on the environment and development, as well as also our deepest appreciation and gratitude to partners, long-standing partners, ADB, IGS, UNEP, for co-organizing this event, as well as actually in collaborating for the report. Thank you again, and I wish you productive discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Arishabana, Executive Secretary of ESCAP. Next, I would like to introduce Ms. Detian Turing, Director of the United Nations Environment Program, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, joining us via video message.
Your Excellency, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, warm greetings from the United Nations Environment Programme. It is my great pleasure to open this associated event at the 13th session of the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. I thank the Ministry of Environment of Japan, SCAP, ADB, and IGES for co-organizing today's session on synergistic practices to address the triple planetary crisis. Across our region, the impacts of climate change, loss of nature, and pollution are accelerating. Progress on environment-related SDGs remain insufficient, and we face mounting pressures that cross national and sectoral boundaries. Fragmented responses can no longer match the scale and complexity of these challenges. Integrated and synergistic approaches are essential. Today's discussion aligns closely with the APFSD's objective of promoting coordinated and evidence-based action grounded in equity and sustainability. At the 7th session of the UN Environment Assembly held in Nairobi in December last year, member states advanced a resolution on promoting synergies, cooperation, and collaboration for the national implementation of multilateral environmental agreements and other instruments. This resolution encourages countries to enhance national and local level synergies, working with stakeholders and partners. It invites regional and sub-regional bodies, including the UN Regional Economic Commissions, to facilitate multilateral and multi-stakeholder cooperation aligned with nationally determined priorities, and it requests UNEP to support member states with improved tools for efficient MEA reporting to strengthen platforms like MEA Days, and to continue supporting the Bern process linked to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This resolution gives today's event a clear mandate: build practical bridges across agendas and institutions so that countries can realize more co-benefits with fewer trade-offs. Finding from UNEP's flagship report, the 7th edition of the Global Environment Outlook, GEO7, further underlines the need for synergistic solutions. This report highlights that our region has seen large-scale climate-related displacements, extensive land use change, persistent air pollution that has had significant health and productivity impacts. At the same time, the report highlights examples of ecosystem restoration, expanding renewable energy uptake, growing circular economy initiatives that demonstrate that transformation is possible when policies, institutions, and financial systems work together. GEO7 stresses that aligning climate, biodiversity, and pollution responses, supported by coherent financing and integrated socio-ecological accounting, will be critical for enabling system-wide shifts. To support countries in applying these integrated approaches, SCAP, UNEP, and ADB, with IGES as Secretariat, are preparing the Asia-Pacific Synergy Report to be launched at SCAP's Committee on Environment and Development. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the authors of the Asia-Pacific Synergy Report, especially those who are contributing to today's event as speakers. The insights generated today will contribute to refining and strengthening the report's recommendation before its finalization. UNEP remains committed to working with the governments, development partners, the private sector, and civil society across this region. Together, we can translate scientific evidence, policy commitments, and regional collaboration into meaningful results for people and the planet. I wish you a productive and insightful discussion, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. I would like to welcome Ms. Yoko Watanabe, Director of Environment at the Asian Development Bank, who joins us online.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues and partners. It is my great pleasure to join you today on behalf of the Asian Development Bank. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be there in Bangkok, but I'm there from Manila in spirit. and it is a great pleasure to be opening this important event on the Synergy, together with our great partners, including Minister Ishihara, Armida, and Dechen. So thank you very much. So at ADB, we believe that environment is a key solution for our economy, society, and resilience, and that addressing the triple planetary crisis really requires an integrated approach, not working in silos. And as highlighted in ADB's flagship report last year in 2025, the Asia-Pacific Climate Report, which is titled Unlocking Nature for Development in Asia and the Pacific, reveals that 75% of our economy and sectors in Asia and Pacific actually moderately or highly depends on nature. And this represents over 21 trillion in economic activity. And while we recognize the role of nature and biodiversity, the global biodiversity financing gap remains huge. And closing the financing gap in Asia and Pacific will require over 1 trillion annually. And this cannot be done by just working on biodiversity sector or others, but we really need a synergistic approach. And from a development finance perspective, synergistic approach or integrated approach is required not only from the environment perspective for efficiency, but it is important for the economy because integrated approach help us maximize impact for dollar invested, reduce risk for investment, and cloud in the needed private capital that we definitely need to close the gap. And as a regional development bank serving over 40 countries in the region and investing approximately 25 billion annually, ADB is scaling investment on nature and environment. In 2025, 23% of our approved projects included environment and nature investment, and we're aiming for more by 2030, reaching over 30% investment in environment and disaster risk management. So at ADB, under the Environmental Action Plan, which was approved in 2024, we're taking an integrated approach to addressing the triple planetary crisis. And here's some examples that I wanted to highlight today as we translate synergy from theory to tangible outcome on the ground. And obviously, we are highlighting this in the upcoming report that we're all working for. And one of them are the Nature Solutions Finance Hub. And so to promote integrated approach on climate, biodiversity, and pollution, and also livelihoods, we're moving beyond pilots and scaling up impact on nature-based solutions. And this platform is to crowd in both public and private capital. And we have an ambitious $5 billion target towards 2030 in bringing in the needed resources. And I'm happy to inform during the first year, we already mobilized 1.5 billion in pledges from development partners for a handful of investment projects. Another one is ADB's issued first 100 million biodiversity and nature bond at the COP16 in Cali. This is first of its kind among multilateral development banks targeting on investment on biodiversity and nature. And this is sending a strong market signal that private sectors are ready to support nature positive finance. And I have to say the whole 100 million was actually bought by a Japanese insurance company within a month. So there is a real appetite towards investing from the private sector on biodiversity and more in an integrated manner. And finally, I just wanted to highlight also the flagship initiative in ADB on the Regional Flyway Initiative, which is a long-running initiative that highlights synergistic approach through regional cooperation and integration. So the Regional Flyway actually recognized over 147 priority wetlands. And the wetlands is not only important for the migratory bird species that fly from Mongolia to Australia, but it is also the backbone of the economy and livelihood as it provides the needed water and natural capital. And these initiatives demonstrates that how wetland and other biodiversity and other ecosystem provides a needed sort of base for the sustainable livelihood and the economy. And we really hope that these synergistic sort of example will be replicated through the Asia-Pacific Synergy reports that we have been talking about. And of course, it's now in a final stage of, finalizing its report. And ADB sees that this synergistic and integrated approach as essential to mobilizing further resource and scale up our initiative. And also, I wanted to also highlight, as Almida just noted, we have an opportunity to highlight this synergistic approach at the Better Air Quality Conference in Bangkok in 2 weeks' time, where we're again partnering with SCAP and UNEP and Clean Air Asia to highlight that pollution also requires a synergistic approach. So this event is very important from ADB's perspective in aligning cross-sectoral development solutions and advancing in Asia and the Pacific in whole. And we really look forward to furthering innovation, policy support, and strategic partnership and capacity building together with the partners, and use this opportunity as this synergy report provides and move forward with further investment and further scaling the initiative on the ground. So thank you very much again, and I really look forward to a productive discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watanabe. Thank you to our opening speakers for highlighting the urgency and importance of advancing the synergistic approaches. Now we move to session 1, and in this session we will look at synergies from various perspectives: the global perspective, national perspective, and also a perspective of stakeholders. So in this session we have 3 speakers. I would like to introduce 3 of them. First, Mr. Luis Gomez Echeverri, Emeritus Research Scholar at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. And the second speaker will be Ms. Leba Guanavinaka, Fiji Climate Change Adaptation Advisor from the Department of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. And then we will have a commentator who will be Mr. Aditya Vishnu Nugraha. He's a youth representative representing the major groups for children and youth. So please come up to the podium. And the first speaker will be Mr. Luis Gomez Echeverri, and he will deliver a special presentation to set the stage, introducing us to what has been going on at the global level on synergistic approaches and his expectation to Asia-Pacific region. So, Mr. Gomez Echeverri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we will put the slides. Yeah? Okay, fine. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation to be here and to present to have the opportunity to present what we are doing at the global level under the program that is convened by UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the UNFCCC. This is the hardening the synergies between climate action and sustainable development, a roadmap to 2030 and beyond. And the roadmap to 2030 and beyond becomes much more present in our discussion of this project that has been going on for 3 years. We're going into the 4th. It is made possible by the contributions and the participation of some 17 experts from all over the world. Some of them are here, and I would like to highlight Professor Kateuchi and IGES and all of his colleagues, who without them we would not have been able to do much of the work that we have been doing, and we're very, 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 very grateful. But also Ms. Bernardia and Mr. Majun, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody else. But it's a group of experts that is very diverse. It covers all over the world. Former IPCC deputy director, the current one, directors of various institutions around the world, in finance, in biodiversity, etc. So very diverse. I was told to talk a little bit about the history, some of the challenges, and then some of the outcomes. First, I want to talk about the history. This initiative was born as a follow-up to the Global Synergy Conference in Tokyo in July of 2022, where it was a very successful conference. It had a lot of attention. It provided a great deal of recommendations. I'll summarize some of them here. The first recommendation is that we really needed to strengthen the evidence. Why synergies are important. The second one is try to promote integrated planning through policy frameworks that we could, I'm sorry, I should have said next. Scaling up capacity building and sharing experiences, and this we have done by all the reports that we have, which I think have built capacities at the local level. Developing and promoting partnerships for transformations, and this we have done not as actively as we should, but as we move forward, we are going to start doing that more, covering multi-stakeholder dialogues, and informing intergovernmental processes. Some of them have already been mentioned here, and I will mention a little bit later. But let me start with what we have identified as the major challenges of promoting synergies, and some of them were already spoken and addressed in the introductory statements, and how this very important, timely, and relevant report of Asia Pacific will address some of them, and it's already addressing some of them, and it's an extraordinary report that will have a lot of impact on synergies, both because of the quality of this report, and many of you are familiar with it, and second, because of the region that it covers, where synergies are really being practiced more than, in my view, more than in any other part of the world, and given importance. But the challenges that we have come up with is the challenges that we have come up with that we think that we should be talking about are in the knowledge, in the economic, and the political, and the overall fragmentation. In the knowledge area, and this is very well covered in the report, is that there's a lot of data. Wherever you look, there's data, there are models, there are methodologies, but what the problem is that is very difficult for policymakers to say which ones should I be looking at, which are the ones that are the most relevant, and which are the ones that are correct for my own country, for my own locality, for my own circumstances. So we are saying that in order to address this, we should perhaps even, and we have promoted that in our global project, perhaps have a global platform that tries to create an orderly system to try to identify what methodologies are there, how they relate to one another, and to be able to access them with a little bit of vetting, which right now we don't have that. So we will talk more about that as we move ahead. The second one is on the economic, and this has already been mentioned. The area of finance is everywhere. And I think that although the Asia Pacific report has one very important, excellent report on finance, finance appears in every one of them. And I think that this is something, and I will talk a little bit more about the specifics of this, because it is either a big barrier or a big enabler. Most of the time, in my view, it's a big barrier. It's a big barrier, and I will mention the reasons for this, but the overall reason is that there's a lot of fragmentation in the area of finance that really needs to be addressed. The political, we all know, political cycles are short. When they're finished, political priorities change. There's a lack of transparency. There's a lack of collaboration between ministries. In other words, there is a governmental fragmentation, and there's a lack of consistency on commitments of equity, gender equality, and all the other important things that you need to have in order to address synergies correctly. But the big one, we call them the big poison of the synergies initiatives and efforts that we all have, is the fragmentation that happens at every level. And this fragmentation of governance, I just mentioned that, fragmentations across finance, and fragmentations across knowledge and data. And I know the report of the Asia Pacific covers that and addresses it very well, but it almost has to find its way at the global level so it can be addressed much more properly. So I go to the next slide, please. Here, I'm addressing the third question, which is what are the key outcomes of our reports? And here I mentioned that we have 3 reports. The first one was on collecting evidence. The first was 3 years ago. The second one was about what kind of policies do we need in order to address, how to do it in order to address the synergies. And the third one, and we did that last year, was covering the quantification. We all felt that unless we really quantify the impacts, what are the economic impacts, what are the savings, what are the financial implications, how can we address this? Policymakers cannot really push the issue of synergies. So we started to do that, and we came up with shocking results. Hopefully you can take a look at this, but we, in order to how much you actually save if we act in synergy and synergistic approaches. So we put a lot of attention in that. We have expanded, we have also had 7 thematic reports on knowledge and data, which we give a lot of importance, policy frameworks for synergistic action, cities, where we feel are the most important platforms for synergistic action, health, particularly in cities, disaster insurance, which is a topic that is totally under discussed, even in the finance discussions of the UN, which are, in our view, extremely important for the underprivileged, for dealing some of the risk and disaster, etc. And then the last one is on nature and biodiversity, the importance of which was highlighted by one of the speakers in the introductions. So we have increased political advocacy. Many of the instances where synergies have appeared have already been mentioned by the UNEA, but also in the General Assembly and the COP, both in COP 30, but also COP 31 in Belen. We have promoted multi-stakeholder partnerships, and we have enabled partnership uptake in the regional and national levels. We have invited over 100 experts to look at our reports, provide us with their reviews, their views, contributions. So these are reports which are prepared by the 17 experts and ourselves, but it really has a collaboration of some 100 experts from all over the world. I'm almost finished. This I already covered. And then I'd like to focus on only 3 things before I finish. The first one is in the area of finance again, and this is very well covered in the chapter, and I think I summarize it here by simply, it's the finance here, thank you. It's the failure to invest in the amounts needed. We talked about that, failure to invest in the sectors most in need, climate resilient infrastructure, resilient food system, health, gender, failure to invest in the topics most in need, primarily adaptation. Adaptation is heavily under finance, failure to invest in the geographies in most in need, especially in those areas, geographical areas where the most underprivileged, the most affected by climate, and in some aligning climate finance with the urgent needs around the world. The second one is the localizing global actions, and the report talks a lot about that, how important it is to contextualize, and how important cities become for really, that's where most of the action needs to take place. And you know, the idea is that achieving synergy between global climate and sustainable development goals require really tailoring the solutions to local context. And then the last one is on framing synergies to be more just and inclusive, And that one is one that is, again, under-discussed, under-touched, and I think our report tries to really make an emphasis in making sure that we are really addressing this, because we are talking about promoting synergies in a way which also address the underprivileged and the most needful. So the report has provided a lot of recommendations. I'm not going through all of them, but I'd like to highlight three of them. The first one is on fragmentations, and we call fragmentations is the enemy of synergies that we really need to address. Avoiding top-down approaches, contextualized, and the third one is on data, and how important it is to really address the issue of data. It's one of the biggest, in my view, challenges that we have, where we need to address this collaboratively and together. And just to end, we are now in discussions of where do we go next. So we have started that conversation already next week with our group. And one of the things that has come up again and again is we are living in really difficult times. Geopolitical distortions, geopolitical challenges that we have never seen before, and we really need to adapt our synergistic and our synergies initiative to address all of this in a way which addresses some of these and lives in the context of these difficult situations. And hopefully we'll be talking about that in the next week, in the next 3 days, but we will be talking about this much in the next few months before we go to the meeting in June here in Bangkok as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez Echeverri, for sharing insight from the global synergy work and also highlighting the challenges that we have to overcome in order to actually implement the synergistic approaches. And you also highlighted the importance of localizing. And in this context, I would like to invite Ms. Leba Guanavinaka, Fiji Climate Change Adaptation Advisor from the Department of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, to share how Fiji has been tackling or implementing synergistic approaches. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Moderator. Bulavinaka, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lemba from Fiji's Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. I work as the Adaptation NDC Advisor. So basically to support technical assistance and policy advisory support for the acceleration of climate adaptation actions, particularly the ones that we have committed or outlined in our nationally determined contributions. We launched our third NDC last year at COP30. On that note, back home at the national level, we do recognize that addressing this triple planetary crisis has to take a synergistic and integrated approach. We are a small island state with a developing country economy. Of course, that comes with its inherent challenges of limited physical space and capacity constraints. We do also recognize the opportunities within that, opportunities for collaboration at all levels, at the subnational, trickling down to communities with direct access support, as well as at the national, regional, and with our development partners. On that note, that can take several forms. It can take the form of innovative climate financing modalities or mechanism that are new and can be piloted. There are also programs that are existing and have demonstrated proof of concept that are ready for scaling. So some of these initiatives we have outlined as commitments within our NDCs. If we start from the Department of Climate Change, we're always looking for programs, projects that help us achieve our mitigation and adaptation targets, but that also help address, that has multiple core benefits, including addressing pollution. We did last year also launch our Sustainable Finance Roadmap that also outlines, our Reserve Bank of Fiji launched that, also outlining that funding or or loans that would be granted to the private sector in terms of addressing mitigation and adaptation targets would also have that criteria of ensuring how they prove that they will eliminate or reduce pollution. Okay, so those are some programs that we have put in place in terms of policies. It's outlined in our National Development Plan, our NDCs, and those guiding instruments. But in terms of community level, we have, I jotted down a few examples here that's really being operationalized across the Fiji group. So we have the nature-based solution seawalls that more than 70% of our communities reside along the coastal belts, and right now we have the Ministry of Agriculture and Waterways that looks after, that has the responsibility of ensuring coastal protection and riverbank stabilization for communities that suffer from inundation and issues surrounding that. But we also, the government funds less than 10 of those seawalls within their budgetary provision for the relevant ministry. So a lot of the partnership support in coastal protection comes from donors and partners. So we have ADB, for example, that's funding 6 of those sites. The Adaptation Fund is funding 14. We have the Kiwa Regional Initiative that's funding another 6. Not only for example, we have those donors that are financing directly the construction of these nature-based seawalls, and I'll touch on the design on the nature-based seawalls. It's adapted from a design initially done by JICA for protecting the main roads. So it has, boulder and rock revetments, and then you have around 3 to 6 layers of mangroves as the first line of defense, and you have vetiver grass and riparian vegetation protecting the coast. So it's got that mitigation core benefits. It also prevents the use of, with some communities, they use tires, rubber tires as their coastal defense. So you replace those tires with these nature-based seawalls, and you sort of have that triple benefit. So this design has been patented by the Department of Waterways. They had made an iteration to it and patented, and they're rolling it out for communities. We have a list of about 170 communities where they need to roll this out. And so we also have partners that support in terms of reviewing the engineering design of these nature-based seawalls. So these nature-based seawalls are one of the 34 nature-based solution types that Fiji has registered in our sort of Fiji's inventory on nature-based solution. It is online. You can Google that. You could come across a document that was produced by the Climate Adaptation and Protected Areas Network with the Fiji government. So it outlines 34 types of nature-based solutions, one of it being the ones that I mentioned that is heavily supported as well by partners. There's a second example I wanted to mention, and I'll probably not go into too much details on this second one, but happy to discuss or expand on it further later if anyone has questions. This is on climate mobility, planned relocation as an adaptation measure of last resort. There are the fellow panelists before me spoke about fragmentation. We have a standard operating procedure that outlines how Fiji approaches this issue, 17 steps on what happens to result in a community being relocated. And the reason why this SOP is in place is to exactly address that fragmentation, to ensure that everyone that is involved in this space is clear on the principles that guide this process and who does what across the various stages. So the work on this is guided by a government-led task force called the Fiji Task Force on Relocation and Displacement. The main advisory arm to that is a technical working group involving all the development partners and all the CSOs and NGOs that operate in this space. So, for example, UNICEF works on the child protection and safety in the context of relocation, checklist and guideline, facilitators guides. UNDRR supports with the risk assessment tools and GIZ with the risk assessment tools that justify the relocation of a community and ensures that the place we're moving them into addresses, ensures that they're safer, that the place that they are moving into has all this access to health facilities, it's safer from the old site, also addresses waste management issues at the new site, also ensuring that the buildings that are constructed there are category 4, category 5 cyclone proof. That of course comes with costs. When we build all these safeguards into the process, it raises the costs as well for government. So we have a dedicated trust fund that addresses the relocation of communities. But again, like I mentioned earlier, with this example, that is the measure of last resort. Before you reach that, there are alternative adaptation solutions that should be explored, and there are financing instruments that also looks at supporting communities to avert the need for them to relocate. So we're looking at a communities climate adaptation fund that by GCCM. There is also IOM's climate catalytic fund. These are alternative funding to what is being funded by the Kroc Trust Fund. So again, with this modality, this is co-designed. So these development partners are coming on board with this type of financing modalities that are co-designed with the countries, looking at complementarities to ensure that they are meeting the gaps and the needs or where those financing gaps are. We also have this Fiji Rural Electrification Fund. This is to finance communities that do not have access to the main power grid network. So for that, it is a revolving fund that is seed funded by government, was supported also by philanthropic donors like Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation started the first site. So once that has rolled, we have communities that are using that micro mini grid that have replaced the diesel generators that used to electrify that community. We've now rolled it to 7 more communities, and we're looking at expanding that to 70 communities. The plan is once you have the threshold of 70 communities that are paying tariffs back into the revolving fund, that it would be a self-sustaining fund, the FREF Trust Fund, and then you can roll that out to the more than 300 communities that are still on that waiting list. So that's one example. The other one is e-bus. This is a plan to have electric buses along Fiji's busiest corridor, the Suvarnasori corridor. So a fleet of 100 buses to trial this e-bus. That is also pending a few more work that needs to be in place before that can be rolled out. The other example would be the sanitary landfills. We have only one sanitary landfill in Fiji. It's reaching maximum capacity on stage 1 at the moment, and we're looking at expanding with ADB support currently to explore a new sanitary landfill in the western side of Fiji. Again, coming down to the circular economy, there's I mentioned the Sustainable Finance Roadmap. There is also installation of what we're having like trash booms along our major waterways to trap plastic pollution along Fiji's main rivers and streams. So they have been taking tons of rubbish outside of Fiji's waterways before it reaches the ocean. These are some small initiatives that the government is scaling up that have proven program readiness for upscaling. The other one touches on the 30 by 30 targets. So this is another space where a lot of innovative financing is coming in terms of 30 by 30 terrestrial, 30 by 30 MPAs. We have the Wade Foundation, philanthropic, again, support funding the Marine Spatial Plan. It's basically to outline the plans on which areas need to qualify for full protection and which one would have some sort of protection and what that type of protection would look like. We also have the Bezos fund that's come in this year. So this involves 2 government ministries, our ministry and Ministry of Fisheries, to roll this out and do surveillance on the tuna domestic Fiji flagged fishing vessels to install electronic monitoring equipments on the fishing vessels to be able to track where they're fishing within Fiji's waters. Again, this is something that will be rolling out this year, and it is part of a regional initiative. So where countries really design with the think tanks of this Bezos fund what that would look like in their country context. So for Fiji's case, we have these 4 program activities. We have the MSP regulations, and then the monitoring and surveillance, and then a conservation fund to help the ocean users in that transition, including the Fiji fishing industry, as well as a fund called the Blue Accelerator Grant, which UNDP already piloted stage 1. So Bezos is going to expand on that for phase 2 to roll that out to 40 more recipients of the grant, community-led initiatives that have proven how they can manage oceans and also have this win-win with lessening pollution, and as well as sustaining the livelihoods of the communities within this project. So that can be seaweed farming, coral restoration. Some of it has been, they have this mangrove eco park. One of the communities got a BAGS grant for that, to convert the mangroves into a mangrove eco park instead of a development of a hotel on that coastline. So when the cruise liners come, they also can go along those, and they collect, the community can gain from those type of initiatives. So yeah, again, I think the main point is co-designing of these programs and activities into what is really needed at the national and sub-national. The designing of this solution that addresses these needs, but having those honest conversations with the donors on the design of the solution. Sometimes the countries, they articulate the needs, but they're also not there in the actual designing of the solutions, on the programmatic support that trickles down to ensure that the impact and the resource mobilization efficiencies would be achieved. So I think that was just the point I also wanted to highlight there, and then ensuring that partners that come on board into these spaces are working complementarily to each other, and just to reduce duplication and of efforts, funding the same initiatives that you could be addressing the same things. Yes, I'll perhaps leave it there, and I'll be pleased to expand on any of those points later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's encouraging to hear so many synergistic solutions that are being implemented on the ground, and thank you very much for sharing that. So now we have heard from the global perspective and national perspective, and I would like to invite Mr. Nugraha, representative of the major group of children and youth, to reflect your reflections and also youth perspective on synergistic approaches.
Check. Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, speakers, and fellow youth leaders. My name is Aditya from Indonesia. In my opinion, as a youth and being born from the marginalized family as well, the idea of synergy practices sometimes is not just an abstract political idea, but it's vital and structural necessity from the top to the bottom level. Why? Because from my engineering background, I know that environmental risks and challenges are deeply interconnected with each other. Climate change, for instance, intensified water stress, unsustainable urban growth, worsen land use, coastal degradation, but our policy response often remains fragmented, sectoral and institutional siloed. Jakarta, for example, the metropolitan city with almost 40 million people in it, has to deal with the complex issue for decades, such as land subsidence, compound flooding, sea level rise, and urban settlement and rapid urbanization. Our witness is how these environmental crises intersect across sectors. It was linked to the groundwater governance for the land subsidence, spatial planning as well, urban or water spatial planning, infrastructure development, and data systems. Addressing it required cross-ministerial coordination and the harmonization of the data to ensure a shared scientific baseline. In this regard, from my experience, we use and we agree in that time, use the data from the JICA for the groundwater level and the land subsidence level in Jakarta metropolitan area. From young people, we expect something different in this regard. First, we expect coherence. If we are serious about achieving the SDGs number 11, sustainable cities, cannot move forward without 13 and 14. Especially 14, life below water is inseparable from the land. Synergy from our perspective means aligning data systems, budgets, regulations, and institutional mandates, not just aligning narratives. Second, we expect science-informed governance. In many cities across Asia-Pacific region, environmental risks are compounded by inconsistent data and fragmented monitoring system, as we know. Whether we are talking about air pollution, land subsidence, compound flooding, or sea level rise. Youth, in this regard, expect government to adopt credible scientific baseline and ensure that transparent data sharing mechanisms. Without trusted data, synergy becomes rhetoric rather than practice. Third, we expect participation to go beyond consultation. Youth are active contributors, yes, because we are the implementers, innovators, and community organizers. We are the leader of today, and we are the leader of tomorrow. For example, with my organization, Children and Youth International and Green Democracy Institute, we have seen how bottom-up initiatives could strengthen resilience among the community. However, this effort must be better connected to formal governance policy and framework to create vertical alignment. However, based on the field, we have still some challenges remained. One major challenge that I note is institutional inertia. Government structures are typically designed around sectoral mandates. Another one is, the other speakers already speak about the financing as well. And the third one is equity. Why? If synergy doesn't explicitly prioritize social justice for marginalized people, then why do we have to deal with this topic then? Looking ahead, our future, our priorities are clear. First, our recommendations, institutionalize cross-sector coordination. This is what we have done in Jakarta adaptation plan that we have Greater Jakarta Project Management Office, because environmental governance must be measured holistically. It must be measured holistically. Second, strengthen regional cooperation across Asia Pacific to harmonize data standard and facilitate peer learning among cities facing shared risk. Environmental risk transcends transboundary, and so must our response. Third, structure integration of youth into advisory and implementation platform. Synergy isn't incomplete if we exclude the demographic bonus that already began, that will inherit the long-term consequences of today's decisions. At last, if we align science with policy, institution with communities, and ambition with accountability, synergy will no longer a principle on paper. In my opinion, it will become the architecture of sustainable development goals itself. I always say in every session and in every facilitation, give the voice to the voiceless. Now I thank you for having me here to listening my voice as a youth and from the underrepresented community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for pointing out the challenges, but also suggesting solutions. Very constructive suggestions. Thank you very much. So this concludes session 1. And session 2 is our deep dive into synergies in action. To provide our framing presentation, I am pleased to introduce Mr. Eric Zussman, Director of the Integrated Sustainability Center at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, IGES, joining us online.
Thank you very much, Amanuma-san and colleagues. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, allow me to share my screen real quickly. Okay, so I'm honored to provide this framing presentation for this important segment on synergies in action. And the purpose of the framing presentation will be to give a little bit more background on the synergy report itself while previewing some of the key messages. It's broken up into 4 main sections. The background and rationale for the Asia-Pacific Synergies work, a little bit on the process of developing the report and its structure, and then I will highlight 10 key messages that are coming out of the current draft, and this will hopefully pave a way to fruitful discussion among colleagues on how we can put synergies into action. So in terms of background, I think we've heard this message loud and clear from many of the speakers already, but I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that synergies are the only way forward in terms of accelerating progress on many international processes. As we've already heard, we're living in an unfortunate period, but synergies offer a way to bring together much of the work that's been going on the SDGs, on the Paris Agreement, on the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, work on plastic pollution and other forms of pollution such as air pollution. And as we move forward through the decade of action and look forward towards a post-2030 up to 2050 agenda, I think this is one of the key vehicles that we can pursue to bring together much of our energy and effort to achieve the future that we all want. In terms of the work that's being done in Asia Pacific and on this report, we're very grateful to be co-led by 4 distinguished colleagues who I believe are either in the room or actively participating online. So we extend our appreciation to Bernardia, to Professor Takeuchi, to Majun, and Dr. Somya, who have all given us guidance as we've developed the report. We also enlist a team of more than 50 different authors from throughout the region, as well as good partnership with our colleagues at UNSCAP, UNEP, as well as ADB, and the kind support from colleagues at the MOEJ, and guidance, of course, from colleagues from JICA and other key institutes. We're also grateful to have collaboration with colleagues from the Global Synergies effort, UNDESA, the UNFCCC Secretariat, among others. In terms of the report itself, it's broken up into 9 main chapters along with an executive summary. I will talk briefly about how the chapters flow in just a bit, but just to suggest that one of the key and perhaps unique selling points of the report is that it's also underpinned by 100 synergy case studies. Approximately 35 or so of them are actually covered directly within the report, and the remaining case studies will be featured as part of a platform that we'll be using and a compendium that we'll be using to promote the operationalization of synergies throughout Asia and Pacific. And as colleagues have already suggested, I think one of the really interesting perspectives that comes out of this report is that synergies is no longer just a concept that we hear about on paper, but it's actively being practiced on the ground, and many of the key examples can be found in the Asia-Pacific region. In terms of the development of the report itself, we began all the way back in the summer of 2025 with our first in-person meeting in Manila, and that's been carried through a series of different side events, discussions, and leading us all the way up to this special event here today in February. The report will be finalized approximately April of 2026 and will be launched at the SCAP Conference on Environment and Development, the 9th Conference on Environment Development in July 2026. And I want to actively encourage all of those that are in the audience today to make sure that the report, once it is launched, does not once again sit on the ground, but it actually becomes an operating manual that will lead to more transformative actions that are animated by synergies. Now, in terms of the key messages that are coming out of the report, I want to emphasize that these are still preliminary at this point, and one of the purposes of the meetings that we're having in Bangkok is to refine these further. But these are 10 of the key messages that we see coming out of the current version. And 3 of those messages relate to this big overarching question: why should stakeholders in Asia Pacific promote synergies? And so here I think in terms of the why question, we really have this argument once again about accelerating SDG progress. And there's sort of 3 rationales there that can help accelerate SDG progress. One, as we've already heard, is about reducing some of the possible trade-offs that might arise. A second one, which is very contemporaneous with some of the trends we see happening now, is about affordability and lowering the costs of action. And then there's also this argument about dynamic efficiencies that can be captured, delivering outcomes that are greater than the sums of their isolated parts. Now, in order to capture all of these different types of benefits, it's really increasingly important to have pragmatic and examples that have been practiced on the ground. And what we show throughout the report is in a region as diverse and dynamic and exposed as Asia Pacific, this is already happening. Moreover, we argue in the report that synergies are not optional. They are absolutely essential in the region, given these characteristics. And therefore, synergies needs to become an organizing principle of policy, of planning, and investment in Asia Pacific, and then in other regions as well. Now, a second set of key messages relates to how should stakeholders in Asia Pacific advance synergies. And this comes through many thematic chapters that we have. We have 4 key thematic chapters. And so if I'm a policymaker and I'm asking myself, what should I do to actively promote synergies in any part of Asia, I might look at these 4 different entry points or transformative pathways. One is focusing on health-centered climate action, which is a powerful driver of both climate ambition and equity. A second is this approach to nature-positive development or nexus-based development, which we see coming through a lot from the APFSD initiatives. And this offers a way to manage trade-offs across food, water, climate, and health systems. A third possible entry point or transformative pathway is focusing on the circular economy, where we try to bring into the fore core provisioning systems that address pollution at its source and move the target further upstream so that we're capturing multiple benefits as we move forward. And then the last key entry point are sustainable cities. These cities are obviously hubs of innovation where there's often emissions that are concentrated, resource uses that are concentrated, and concentrated vulnerabilities. And while that might seem like a setback, we see this as actually an opportunity to offer some of the greatest potential for integrated solutions, especially when forward-looking leaders capitalize on their flexibility to bring together shared concerns. Now, a third set of messages come from this last set of questions on how can stakeholders in Asia Pacific enable progress down synergistic or transformative pathways. And here again, we emphasize 4 different enablers or means of implementation. And one of them is obviously this idea of synergistic finance, wherein we're trying to create incentives for multi-sectoral action, both within existing financing mechanisms, as well as trying to blend together different finance streams to capture different efficiencies. Now, I want to underline here, we're not necessarily talking about creating a new financing mechanism, but capitalizing on some of the powers and incentives in existing financing mechanisms to recognize and reward co-benefits. A second set of enablers focuses on data and tools, and here we really emphasize the active use of integrated modeling and data systems that capture interlinkages, co-benefits, and recognize trade-offs, and that are accessible across sectors, levels of government, and to different levels of society as well. I think here it's increasingly important, as our colleague Lewis mentioned, to try to underline the different functions and features of different data sets and tools to make them usable for policymakers. A third set of recommendations involves governance. And here, we've already heard this type of message, but I want to just reiterate it because I think it's absolutely essential to animating synergies. This focuses on institutionalizing whole of government approaches, and I would also argue incentivizing whole of government approaches. This requires moving beyond coordination in principle to mechanisms that align mandates, budgets, and accountability across ministries and between national and local levels. And I think if you look in the governance chapter, you'll see a pragmatic approach which draws from some of the work on sustainability transitions and basically moves from very tactical, on the ground type of governance to strategic governance, all the way up to transformative governance, and outlines a gradual process how you can actually institutionalize these whole of government approaches. And then the last enabling reform really focuses on the role of regional cooperation and regional organizations. And here I think it's really important to emphasize, because the idea of synergies has really gotten legs within Asia Pacific, that countries work together, regional organizations provide a platform that can demonstrate how do we operationalize synergies in different contexts, and how can we scale synergies moving from pilots on the ground to policy and transformative action for the region. So I'd like to leave it at that, and then I hope this paves the way once again to a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zussman, for setting the stage. And thank you for sharing with us the Asia Pacific Synergy Report's background, rationale, as well as the key messages. And this session too, we will have panelists directly involved in writing different chapters of the Asia Pacific Synergy Report. And as is already highlighted, it's a report that's being written right now. So this also serves as an opportunity to collect insight from the participants. So your active participation, active discussion is much welcome. So now we will move on to the first round of expert panel discussion. And this first panel will be moderated by Ms. Yoo-Jun Kim, Senior Program Management Officer at the United Nations Environment Program, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. And I will introduce panelists as well, and please come up to the podium as I introduce you. First, Mr. Takeuchi Kazuhiko, President of IGES, speaking on biodiversity and nature positive solutions. Next, Mr. Nakamura Hayato, Senior Program Manager, IGES, focusing on climate and health. Next, Mr. Heinz Schandl, Senior Principal Research Scientist and Circular Economy Lead at CSIRO, discussing pollution and circular economy. And Ms. Bernadia Irawati, Secretary General of United Cities and Local Government, Asia Pacific, on city and resilience. And after this panel discussion, we will get comments and reflections from Mr. Ernesto Soria Morales, Senior Policy Analyst from OECD, as well as Ms. Muskan Lamba. She's a representative of Major Group for Children and Youth. Now the floor is yours, Ms. Yoo-Jun.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yu Jong. I'm from UNEP's Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, and it's my great pleasure to be moderating this session today. So, welcome to our first discussion round on synergistic solutions. We'll be focusing on the thematic areas, including climate, biodiversity, pollution and resilient cities. And this session aims to highlight ongoing efforts of synergistic approaches in the region from regional, national, and local level. So for the next 1 hour, we'll hear from each panelist about their brief insights on their respective areas of expertise. And then we'll have a moderated discussion with 1 or 2 common questions, followed by inputs from the 2 discussants. And finally, there will be Q&A session with the floor. And let's not forget that we have online participants joining through Zoom. So if you are listening to this online, please feel free to leave your questions or comments in the chat. Okay. Now we have 4 distinguished speakers who will each bring a different lens to this synergistic solution discussion: biodiversity and nature positive, climate and health, pollution and circular economy, and cities and resilience. So without further ado, I would like to first invite Mr. Kazuhiko Takeuchi from IGES to talk about biodiversity and nature positive.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for introducing me. Before talking about biodiversity and nature positive on this report to be summarized very soon in the near future, I would like to thank all the contributors as well as the reviewers for these very important activities initiated by many organizations, including the IGES. So I would like to talk a little bit about the biodiversity and nature positive, which is subject of the chapter 3. I would like to ask to the next slide, please. This is a summary of the chapter. We need to recognize the importance of the Asia-Pacific region. As you can see in this statement that 17 of the 36 global biodiversity hotspots are in our region. And at the same time, a massive loss of wildlife population, the forest cover, coral, etc., has been identified also in this area. And therefore, we need to conserve our environment, and even we need to improve our environment so that we will continue our sustainability in terms of the relationship between the people and nature. Because we have lots of the global challenges, we need to take an effective approach. So Nexus approach, as we are discussing, is a very important aspect in order to maximize synergies and minimize the trade-offs among the elements of biodiversity, water, food, health, and climate through holistic manner. You could see a recent APFSD report showing also the importance of taking the Nexus approach, not only in the scientific discussion, but also in the process of implementing the results of our achievement. Next, please. So expected summary of the chapter is like this. We need to appreciate indigenous and local knowledge systems. Particularly, we can look at the importance of this aspect in the Asia-Pacific region because we have a rich ILK knowledge systems. And also, I have been studying since I was a senior vice rector of the United Nations University. We proposed the concept of Satoyama and Satoumi, starting at the COP10 of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Satoyama and Satoumi is a kind of the system to be created by the interaction between the people and nature, originally in Japan. And we wanted to expand this idea to the other part of the world in collaboration with many researchers and other stakeholders. And then we launched Satoyama Initiative at the COP10, and we will soon organize our big event in South America to further develop our ideas and collaborate with the local people in South America. And also, if you look at the South America, you could see the various indigenous and local knowledge systems. And so how we could apply this idea with their own resources and knowledge generation systems. So these are the major tasks that we are now trying to further develop. And of course, with regard to the international discussion, Nature Futures Framework is highlighted. It is important to recognize and to appreciate the diverse value of nature, so that we could take a Nexus approach more holistically and more effectively. The key components of the Nexus governance, we could highlight these aspects. First one is integrative and holistic and transdisciplinary framing of problems and solutions. And inclusive approaches that bring about enhanced arenas of actor engagement. Normative consideration of equity and justice alongside accountability. Enhanced mechanisms and processes for collaboration and coordination across scales and sectors. And finally, adaptive, flexible, and experimental approaches to learn from what works and to scale these solutions. So these are the key components that we need to further elaborate. Next, please. And now we are in the process of drafting the key message, and we are now identifying several issues. The importance of regional leadership, particularly in the context of the Asia and Pacific as a leading areas for discussing about nature positive solutions. And then we need to take the Nexus approach, as many of us already emphasized its importance. And then the governance is also important. Inclusive governance, not just one stakeholder, but also we need to invite various stakeholders, including the youth, for determining of our sustainable future. And also, we need to co-create and co-design the localized solutions. And the NBS, nature-based solution, is one of the key way of solving issues in order to create the harmonious coexistence between the people and nature. And harmonize standards, share data, and mobilize finance for nature-based solutions. It is very important to discuss with the political arena as well. And corporate value, the private sectors. Business sectors are not only considering about their business for getting benefit, but they are moving toward how they could contribute into the society. So this idea is summarized with the term of CSR. And this CSR need to be applied when we discuss about nature positive society. how we could create this society. And also, it is needed to strengthen the public-private partnerships. Next, please. Recently, I have been collaborating with the Keidanren, the biggest economic group in Japan, and they are now trying to establish the new organization, which we call the Japan Conference for 2030 Global Biodiversity Framework. And in short, it's called JGBF. And the chairman of the Keidanren is the chair of this JGBF. I'm supporting him and serving as a vice chair of this group, supported very strongly by the Ministry of the Environment of the Government of Japan. And recently, the Keidanren published the proposal for integrating biodiversity and natural capital conservation with sustainable economic growth. And this is remarkable because Keidanren previously focused on the environment, but mainly on the climate change mitigation. But nowadays, they are also emphasizing the importance of dealing the nature-positive economy and how we could try to combine these two issues, climate and biodiversity, nexus issues. Integrated approach is very, very important. And then corporate mainstreaming and disclosure. TCFD is on climate, and TNFD on biodiversity. And previously, they discussed separately, but now they are trying to integrate it, TNFD and TCFD. This is a remarkable progress in terms of integrating rather fragmented discussions. And there are significant rise in biodiversity actions in corporate activities and philosophies. And we are hoping that this trend will become the mainstream of the private sector's activities. For example, if we talk about the food system, so previously they considered the food system itself, but now they are trying to consider how the food has been transported, how we consume the energy through the process of transportation, and how we produce the food sustainably, and then how we could minimize the waste, food waste. So these sort of things are to be highlighted in our recent discussion and actions. And also at the Ministry of the Environment, they recently started a new certification system, which is called Nationally Certified Sustainably Managed Natural Sites, meet to the 30 by 30 challenges. 30 by 30 is easy to say, but it's very difficult to materialize because previously we had the Aichi biodiversity target, much lower target, and we could achieve this by enlargement of the nature conservation areas and so on. But if you try to ensure the 30 by 30, it is not enough to consider only on the protected areas. You must consider about the expansion of the areas to the other part of the land and nature. For example, if the area is forested areas, either this forest could be also considered as the forest contributing to the nature conservation or marine ecosystem also. And so the private sector will become very important. And therefore, we are very pleased that we could start to discuss with the private sectors in Japan about the expansion of our conserved areas to meet the 30 by 30 challenges. And we are hoping that this is not only for Japan, but also because this is a global target, and therefore we are very pleased to collaborate with many other parts of the world to meet the global challenges to achieve the 30 by 30 in the future. So that is the end of my presentation, and I would like to thank for your listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Takeuchi, for bringing in this important governance issues, especially the role of indigenous peoples and local communities and the private sector. Okay, now I would like to move on to the next speaker, Mr. Hayato Nakamura from IGES, who will briefly talk about the climate and health intersection.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. My name is Hayato Nakamura. Normally, I'm working more for the Article 6 implementation partnership. It's more for implementing Article 6 on mitigation action, but under President Takeuchi, and it's more like all, and this synergy is all IGES work, so that I'm joining some of the work for, I mean, of course the climate, but also the health is very, very important matters. And unfortunately, so that today we didn't have, we couldn't have Dr. Somia from India. For the health expert, but also as a lead author, so that we have Professor Zhang Keijun from China, Hong Kong University Science and Technology, Guangzhou, so that, and so that this is, I mean, this chapter itself is an integrated approach, but also it's overlapped with various chapters. But important thing is that the climate action is, I mean, delivers various outcomes whatsoever, but also related with other matters, and the health can be the driver of the work, and more like a strategic entry point with accelerating climate pathways in Asia Pacific. So that, and the climate change is already a defining health challenge across the region. However, our regional analysis shows something deeper, and health is emerging not only as an outcome, but as a driver shaping climate ambition, governance, and the investment decisions. And the health framing translates abstract climate targets into tangible societal priorities. In doing so, so that it strengthens the alignment with 1.5 degrees Celsius consistent climate pathways by accelerating near-term system and transformation. So that we see the three systems where synergies are already emerging from the various cases. In energy system, for example, like a sustainable cooling demonstrates how heat risks drive energy efficiency, urban planning, and demand side transition. And the food system, of course, there are the various works, but for example, agrivoltaics illustrates how integrates solution protecting farmers' community health while advancing mitigation and adaptation. And many people have already mentioned about the cities. It's like urban, integrated urban climate action, clean mobility. I was mentioned by Fijian the speaker. And even here in Bangkok, so there are so many impacts. It's more like the remarkable, the first ITMOS transferred the work by Switzerland and Thailand. And that's also urban matters, including green infrastructure, heat resilient planning, so that it's combined various matters. But these are not isolated examples, so that they illustrate how health framing helps operationalize sectoral transformation within the broader climate pathways. Next slide, please. So from these regional experiences, so the several enabling factors stand out. So the successful factors, so that from the regional cases, health narratives builds political momentum and social acceptance, and also the cross-sector governance, health, energy, health, urban agriculture, so all related matters, and the data linking climate risk to health outcomes, and also local and some national leadership is very, very important. So that the role of the local and some national action, because all the mitigation and adaptation actions happen to be at the level of the local area, so that, and the tangible activities, so the cities and the communities are frontline of implementers. And the heat action, for example, and the plans, urban design, farmer engagement, so the local key actions for each project and also the programs. And the local action informs the national strategy, so that there is a linkage with national and locals. So there are other policy recommendations emerging from the Asia Pacific for the governments. Of course, integrating health into national determined contribution, national adaptation plans, long-term strategy is very, very important. And I have not put in here, but it is important that the national government to framing the local involvement, and the local sides needs their leadership to implement. And for the regional organization like ESCAP and also the other regional organization, the harmonized metrics and the knowledge platforms can be very, very important matters. And for different partners, finance models recognizing health core benefits, and for example, Article 6, that I am engaged on a day-to-day basis, but also the blended finance as enablers for the work for further arrangement. But anyway, so that if we position health as the center, the climate ambition becomes faster, fairer, and more implementable. So that's the message from the Health and Economy chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nakamura. I fully agree that health framing and health narrative can make action more tangible and politically viable. And it should apply to beyond climate action, also to pollution and nature action as well. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Heinz Schundel from CSIRO, and who will be focusing on pollution and circular economy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, participants. It's a real pleasure to be here. When I was asked by IHS if I would contribute to a chapter on pollution and the circular economy, I did what you often do when a topic is close to your heart. You say yes when you should rather have said no. But the good news is I had a number of really very knowledgeable co-authors, which helped a lot. And also two people from IHS, Hota-san and Aoki-san, who also contributed to the chapter, especially also in regards to the large amount of case studies that we found and underpinned that chapter. So thank you to all of the co-authors who are here or who are not here today. I'd like to, in my short presentation, make a few fundamental statements that show you how we understood our approach to the chapter, and then focus in on the 6 key findings and end on another note, if I may. So all of us, I think, know that environment and sustainability policy is the most complicated area of public policy that you can think of. It's characterized by the complexity of the issues. Everything seems to be related with everything else. There's contestation. Often we cannot agree what to do. There's a lot of uncertainty. And let's also mention ignorance. There are things we don't know. So you could ask yourself, how do you even write a report about synergies, and how are you going to read it as a decision maker in policy or in industry? Next slide, please. So I just want to illustrate to people what we're actually dealing with. in the year 2020, globally, we managed an economy that depended on 100 billion tons of materials. So of these materials, more than 90% are sourced from virgin sources. And the process by which we extract and then transform materials into a state that they can actually be used in a manufacturing process, we already expand 50% of climate impacts, 90% of biodiversity and water stress, land use impact, habitat destruction, and 30% of pollution. All of this occurs in these early stages. So the circular economy is kind of a very profound answer to the problem of materials management, by which we mean, can we turn this system around? Can we increase the amount of secondary material that is used in the economy and do that at a lower environmental cost, at low environmental impact than the virgin materials? But more importantly, can we manage an economy that depends less on primary materials, because we are on a pathway to grow to 160 billion tons of materials by 2060. So we need to reduce our material footprint. This underpins the chapter. Next slide, please. Asia and the Pacific has been very close to my heart. In 2010, with the co-authors, I published a paper on material use and resource efficiency in the Asia-Pacific region. For the first time in that paper, we recognized how big the impact of our region on global material flows has become, already then in 2010. We just last week published a reanalysis of this, which is a bit more optimistic. So we can see now, 20 years on in our region, a lot of examples of where we have actually managed to stabilize our resource use, to achieve human development outcomes with much lower levels of resource use. So you could say some of the promise of the circular economy is already coming through. Next slide, please. So what do we find now in a report that focuses on materials management, that thinks about the fact that all the environmental implications we see can also be seen as symptoms of that materials management, and the circular economy could actually be a solution to those issues? So the first statement we make in the report is the pollution and waste problem, the greenhouse gas emission problem in Asia and the Pacific is not a problem of isolated policy and regulatory, of economic failure. It's systemic. It's a systemic outcome of how we manage materials. The circular economy can only offer strategies when we really move away from a pollution prevention end of pipe to start of where the problems originate. So we're moving up the life cycle of resource management, of materials utilization into the economy. Only then can we deal with waste and pollution through the circular economy. And not surprisingly, synergies, as the whole report states, are deliberative policy outcomes. They are not incidental co-benefits. So that means we really need to rethink about the policy process in the way we organize policy. And I would always argue many countries in Asia Pacific are actually in a very good position, because with the Economic Reform Commission, the 5-year planning process, you already have something in place that is actually much advanced to what we do in the rest of the world. So there's something you can achieve. So we're moving to outcomes that exceed sector-specific interventions. But we can't just rely on policymakers. It's also the decision-making in the boards of companies, many of which sit in the region, where we need to look at these issues. But the good news is the limiting factor in the global economy is no longer capital or the human resource. It's not the availability of the natural resources of the materials, as we can see from the debates that occur also in the newspapers and on the news now every day, where it's about critical minerals, for example, or the resilience of the economic process in regards to sourcing those materials. Next slide, please. So one of the focus areas of the chapter are provisioning systems. And the argument here is, if we can actually have an impact on the way we organize housing, food, energy, and mobility, we already can capture a lot of positive impact in regard to reducing environmental pressures of pollution. But that then harks back to something more profound in the whole SDG debate. and also with regard to the triple planetary crisis, because it's not just the environmental issues we face. We also face an inequality crisis of very large dimensions in the global economy, falling standards of living in some parts of the world, not so much in Asia and the Pacific. And so this inequality and wealth inequality crisis also plays out into the policy process, where you see an eroding legitimation of policy processes, and therefore also what we call democratic backsliding. So the provision systems approach offers us actually the ability to contribute to well-being, and at the same time, especially for lower income groups, and at the same time to solve environmental issues. So that's very profound synergistic legitimation here. It's not a technical feasibility, and as you have heard from previous speakers, the way how we govern, and not just in policy, but also in the business community, the way how we arrive in decision-making makes the real difference. And we need the data and the information that allows us to do that. And then the good news is there are so many scalable proofs of concept in our region. So when you read into the report, not just this chapter, but all the chapters, you see all these examples where synergies are already unfolding. So you could say for the circular economy more specifically, there are so many short-term economically attractive examples already of the circular economy working that you don't just need to say in the long term this is a better concept, you can already see it now. And our last slide. So this is just a visual of the transition process enabled through synergies that we are going through, but with a specific focus on the circular economy. It starts with the idea that the linear economy is actually a dead weight on our economic process and on our social and environmental outcomes, because it is an inbuilt process of value erosion from the get-go. So the circular economy as an economic concept works against this process of value erosion. And when you think of the pathway to change, which is characterized in the middle, what we're looking here in our report is actually mobilizing at the local level. So all of the examples we see are local mobilization examples. But in order to accelerate, we need national policies. And in order to then consolidate and stabilize the circular economy in our region, we need the regional agreement. So for me, the Synergies report is a stepping stone to get to there, to inform national policy making, also to inform business decisions in the region, and then through regional collaboration to actually reach this consolidation potential. But keep in mind, there are very potent megatrends that can either work in favor or against the synergistic approach. So when you think of, for example, all the technical disruption that happens in form of the digital economy, in mobility, in the built environment, and so on and so forth, we need to think of this a little bit like in Australia, when we surf, we need to use the waves to our advantage and not to be drowned by the waves. So I hope this illustrated what Chapter 6 is doing and was kind of informative beyond that. And so I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shandol. And now I will turn to Ms. Bernadia Irawati from UCLG on cities and resilience.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. Sawadika. When we were here last year, when we shared the plan of this report, my commitment at that time, I was saying that this report will not just be put in the bookshelf, but it will be certainly implemented through the platform that we have, which is United Cities and Local Governments that connect 250,000 local governments in 140 countries. So I hope you all will join us because this is, we see urgency in addressing these three planetary crises. So I'm so happy that we have also national government representatives here, our institutions, also local governments networks like us, and of course think tank, and all the players, communities, and business people. I don't know how many are businessmen here, but certainly we need very strong collaborations of the stakeholders. So when we are confronting this triple planetary crisis, climate change, biodiversity, loss, and pollution, but the deeper issue is not only ecological stress. It is governance misalignment. I think this also has been mentioned by other speakers. So these crises are interconnected in biophysical reality, yet our policy system, financing stream, and also institutional mandates remains largely segmented. So nowhere in this misalignment more visible than cities. I think we are very clear that we see this very quite visible in cities. So cities are not simply a site of impact. They are system nodes where global commitments either translate into territorial change or remain aspirational. So the central question is therefore, it's not just cities are important. Indeed, cities are important. We urban issues only capture 3% of global land, but we emit almost 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. So, but the important issue here is whether our governance architecture is aligned with the systematic nature of the crisis. I think we are not having that kind of systematic crisis in place. So, in the chapter, of course, I also like to thank all contributors. I couldn't name all of them, but thank you for your time, your commitment that we finally come up with the draft of this chapter. So there are a lot of practices from across the region, not as isolated success stories, but as an example of systematic alignments. I think there are many, but we could put all of them here. In Shenzhen, public transport electrification was integrated with grid modernization and renewable expansion. Also, mobility and energy were treated as one system, generating simultaneous gain in emission reduction, air quality, and long-term efficiency. Now, Shenzhen is also cooperating with some cities in Indonesia for electrification of public transport system, but we are still in the preliminary discussions. And also in Philippines, governance followed ecological boundaries rather than administrative ones. So basin scale land use planning aligned with aligned climate resilience, biodiversity protection, and urban development within a single territorial framework. And nature-based solutions in multiple cities show that blue-green infrastructure, when embedded in planning and finance, this reduces heat and flood risk while restoring ecosystem and improving public health. Another example is a botanical garden, the largest botanical garden in Surabaya. This is the largest botanical garden that uses mangrove as ecosystem. This is largest in Indonesia. That not only for a sea abrasion and early warning system as well, but they also become a multifunction botanical garden that include also economic activities as well as education center. So secure systems in Seoul, Singapore, Yokohama, I think there are many examples here, digital governance and many others. So across these cases, one lesson stands out. Synergy scales when sectors are aligned and when governance reflects system, not silos. So the lesson is clear. Synergy is not achieved through isolated pilot projects. I think we discussed earlier the importance of upscaling those pilot projects. It emerges when cities integrate land use, mobility, building ecosystem, and others. And of course, governance under coherent institutional frameworks, where such integration is absent, then co-benefits remain unrealized and trade-off intensity. So we also talk about key success factors and enabling mechanisms. Indeed, technology is important. Technology alone cannot produce these outcomes. I think institutional alignments does. So across the region, the evidence is consistent that synergetic urban resilience is shaped not primarily by technology but by enabling system. But in many countries, enabling environment also limited, especially for local governments. So first, we found that clear legal mandates and policy coherence between national and local levels reduce fragmentation and define accountability. We have conducted also some enabling environment assessment in 24 countries and looking at SDGs implementation as well. So second, integrated governance structures, including cross-department coordination and metropolitan or basin scale arrangements, allow sectors to align around shared resilient objective. But the previous mention, I think Eric did say that I think coordination should, no, it's not just, we should go beyond coordination. I think we need to institutionalize those integrated governance structures as well. So third, predictability and diversified financing determine skills, a stable fiscal transfer, investment plan, bankable pipeline, and stronger municipal credit worthiness are necessary for integrated synergies to move beyond pilot projects. So fourth, science policy integration, I think we talked also about this, an interoperable data system enables cities to measure co-benefit across climate, biodiversity, and pollution, supporting adaptive and evidence-based decision. And fifth, inclusive and participatory governance strengthen legitimacy and long-term resilience by embedding local knowledge and social equity into policy implementation. So when these five conditions align, synergies become systematic. So when they do not, fragmentation persists. So where these enabling conditions are weak, synergies struggles to move beyond isolated initiatives. So we also talk a little bit about the strategic role of local and subnational governments. Here, first, I think it's very clear that they design urban form through integrated spatial planning. And evidence shows, like, for example, when you have a compact plan, compact cities, transit-oriented urban development alone can reduce emission up to 20 to 26% by 2050 compared to business as usual plan. So there are clear objectives and aims on this. Second, they regulate buildings and infrastructure. And just for your information, local authorities, although they have their own private companies, like local governments own companies. So local authorities, local governments influence energy efficiency, circular resource system, water management, and climate resilient and construction. So in the third, they coordinate across sectors within city administrations. Climate, biodiversity, and pollution do not follow departmental line. I give you examples. We actually we have supported local governments in creating climate action plans by creating also task force that comprise of local governments and other stakeholders as well. And those climate action plans are also integrated in the local planning. Otherwise, it will not be implemented if you don't integrate that. And fourth, they strengthen data systems and project preparation capacity. Finally, they bridge urban, rural, and territorial systems. So the cities certainly depends on surrounding regions for water, food, energy, and ecosystem services. Managing those flows require coordination beyond administrative boundaries. But there is no institutional mechanism of having kind of plans together beyond territories or administrative boundaries. I think that's a big change, a big challenge that cities here in Asia Pacific are facing. So last, we also come up with strategic policy recommendations. We highlight several levels here. One is national governments must strengthen multi-level alignment by embedding urban resilience within climate and development frameworks, clarifying local mandates, aligning sectoral ministries, and ensuring predictable fiscal systems. I will not read all of this, but you can look at later in the chapter. Second, local governments must institutionalize integration through spatial planning, infrastructure standards, cross-sector coordination, and stronger data and project preparation capacity. And for development partners, one of the recommendations relates to We must shift from fragmented pilot towards financing integrated outcomes and long-term institutional strengthening. And last, regional collaboration or regional cooperation must harmonize standards, enable interoperable data system, and support cross-border ecosystem governance. We have a lot of cooperations, regional cooperation here in the Asia Pacific, including ASEAN and, of course, the whole Asia Pacific area. So these actions create enabling architecture for synergetic urban resilience, but architecture alone is not enough. So let me conclude by 3 clear messages here. First, integration must become structural, not theoretical. Second, empowering cities is not optional, it's systematic, it must. And the third, enabling environment matters as much as infrastructure. So last, this is also a message that I like also to share, that the trajectory of triple planetary crisis will be decided in cities. If cities fail, national climate and development targets will also fail. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists for your insights and really interesting sneak peek of the upcoming Asia-Pacific Synergy Report. I'm mindful of the time constraint, so before opening the floor, I would like to directly turn to our discussants. And the first discussant we have is Mr. Ernesto Soria Morales, the Senior Policy Analyst of OECD. So the floor is yours, Mr. Morales.
Thank you very much, and thank you to previous speakers. Good morning from Paris. I'm very pleased to be with you. First of all, well, thank you for all these interventions, and I would like to maybe highlight one simple message. And that is that we cannot move from silos to synergies without a stronger governance. And this report and this session on synergies in action is very timely because we've seen that our challenges interact across climate, biodiversity, pollution, and health, and we need integrated solutions at all levels and a stronger means of implementation. I'm pleased to contribute to today's recommendation. And as we have seen, probably you are aware that we had at the OECD published a flagship report, the OECD Environmental Outlook, that makes the case for stronger governance evident. We see that under current policies, global temperatures are on track to reach 2.10 degrees by 2050, and climate change is projected to become the main driver of biodiversity loss before the mid-century. And at the same time, mismanaged plastic waste is set up to surge by 66%, intensifying pollution across land, rivers, and oceans. And these pressures do not rise in isolation. They amplify one and another. And this means that fragmented silo policy responses are not longer just inefficient. They are actively counterproductive. Only integrated governance can keep pace with interconnected risk. And we see that also in our global monitoring on the SDG 17.14.1, which refers to policy coherence for sustainable development. Many countries in the ongoing global data collection and the preliminary analysis, we've seen that many countries have already created mechanisms for policy coherence and deal with synergies, but most remain only partially implemented, lacking the mandate, capacities, or routines to deliver coherent actions across sectors. And I think this has been highlighted by previous speakers. And the global data is confirming this. So what countries do next? Building on this preliminary analysis, we see first that there is a need to make coordination mechanisms truly operational, turn them from committees on paper into engines of whole of government action, as has been highlighted during the panel. Second, improve assessment of synergies and trade-offs, use shared tools and evidence to anticipate impacts across climate, biodiversity, and pollution before decisions are made, not after. Third, embed coherence into the machinery of government, ensure planning, budgeting, and monitoring routinely check for alignment across ministries and levels. These steps are practical and unlock the synergies we are aiming for. And how the OECD supports this. I'm leading the team working on policy coherence for sustainable development at the OECD, and our work is based on an international standard developed by members and partner countries. And these standards provide the tools. The OECD recommendation is a global benchmark for coherent governance, and we have online tools and assessment methods to help countries identify synergies, spot trade-offs, and manage transboundary impacts that no ministry can address alone. Second, we create the platforms where real change happens through peer learning, through networks of national focal points, through community of practice, and through high-level exchanges, also participating in UN forums. And third, we deliver on the global data collections, governments where they provide information and experiences and showing clearly where capabilities must be strengthened. And fourth, we work directly with countries to drive implementation. We conduct diagnostics, design coherence action plans and institutional arrangements, and build capacities across ministries and levels of government. Across all these four work streams, our goal is simple: to help governments move from silos to synergies and make coherence a routine part of the decision making. I think if we want synergies in outcomes, we need coherence in governance. So thank you very much. I wanted to emphasize this message. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for introducing OECD's work on policy coherence for sustainable development. Okay, the last discussant I have is Ms. Muskan Lamba, the representative of Major Group for Children and Youth.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Muskan Lamba, youth advocate and researcher on the intersections of climate change and mental health. I'm representing the Major Group for Children and Youth, and I also co-chair the Child and Youth Working Group at the Global Mental Health Action Network. Thank you to the organizers and speakers for such a rich and insightful set of reflections. I would like to use my role as a discussant to surface one dimension that sits at the margins of synergy discussions, but is quite central to whether we succeed or fail. Mental health and psychosocial well-being, especially that of youth and children, who will likely experience the triple planetary crisis throughout our lifetimes as we continue to expand science and adaptation. From my own lived experience of mental health challenges, navigating extreme heat in Delhi in India, as well as extreme air pollution worsening year on year, one after the other, I want to highlight that an integral part of health-centered action is mental health as a worsening crisis of its own, but also as an enabling dimension of effective action. So far today, we have focused greatly on systems, infrastructure, finance, and governance, but these crises are also lived as emotional and psychological experiences, as also recognized by the IPCC now. And those experiences strongly influence whether people are able to participate in, sustain, actively build, and trust the transitions we are designing. I have 3 key points to offer on discussions so far. First, on inclusive and participatory governance. Mental health is important for policy consideration and investment as a precondition for effective action because its absence undermines learning, productivity, civic engagement, and collective problem solving, manifesting often as chronic stress and burnout. We know that when distress is chronic and long-term, people disengage even from well-designed transitions. Second, on shared resilience and integrated policy. In the Asia-Pacific specifically, climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution are all risk multipliers as they intersect with high population density, inequality, rapid urbanization, and extremely limited access to mental health care. with many low and middle income countries seeing the majority of people experiencing distress receiving no formal support. Adequate and coherent data on this unique intersection is also greatly missing. Heat waves offer a clear example of why this matters for Synergy. Extreme heat in South Asia, for instance, is becoming chronic rather than episodic, which it was previously. Supported by increasing research, extreme heat disrupts sleep, concentration, learning, and productivity, while also is associated with higher risks of depression, anxiety, common mental health disorders, and suicide. On third point, on localizing global action, a key regional challenge is that dominant mental health frameworks are heavily Western and individualized, while distress in many Asia-Pacific contexts is experienced in collective and relational ways, meaning that suffering is often expressed through physical symptoms, family conflict. There's even reports of gender-based violence in extreme heat environments, as well as social withdrawal, and therefore a lot of our challenges go unnamed and unaddressed in governance and policy systems. For young people specifically, these conditions are showing up often and frequently as burnout, hopelessness, loneliness, and disengagement from many movements, frequently misread as apathy by elders despite reflecting prolonged exposure to environmental stress and multiple crises without us receiving adequate social and institutional support. These impacts are also naturally more pronounced among vulnerable groups, outdoor workers, people in informal settlements, women, queer communities, and low-income groups. As a conversation starter and also for inclusion in the outputs of this important meeting, I offer these perspectives as hope that if we are serious about leaving no one behind, mental health must be treated as its own special and crucial cross-cutting indicator as well as a design principle for synergistic action. So some questions as offering is how it's important to include how transitions are experienced, who bears the emotional and psychological cost of these transitions, whether the most affected can remain engaged long-term, how distress reshapes trust in institutions and collective action, and lastly, what forms of care, support, or repair are built into transitions when harm is inevitable. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all panelists for this exchange. I will now open the floor for question or comments from audience. We'll take just one or two. Any questions, clarifications, or reflection? This is your opportunity to join the conversation. Okay, we have lady in the middle.
Thanks for all the presentations and the great work you have all been doing on different chapters of the report. I have a general question perhaps for leads of different chapters, and it is about the kind of hopes or expectations that you have for the adoption of recommendations and key messages that comes out of this report. I was also actually curious from the previous panel, particularly Dr. Luce's presentation on the climate and SDGs global synergies report, to understand what was the kind of reactions that you got from about that report and the findings and messages that you were offering, and in light of that, what can we really expect for this report?
Something?
Yes, please go ahead.
No, look, thanks. That's a great question. I think there are two dimensions that come immediately to my mind. Very often in such reports, we describe an outcome that we desire. That's how the world should be. But we sometimes fall short to say, and how will that be achieved? How will that practically come about? So I think in the report, we need to do the second step, right? Not just that's how the world should be, but also how do we get there? But then secondly, if you write a book or if you record a record, there's always the management of the impact that you want to achieve. So that the way in which we manage how the report is going to get out into the world and develop a life of its own is as important as writing the report. And I think IHS will have good ideas of how they do that.
One thing I would like to emphasize is the coordination between the global assessment chaired by my colleague, Luis, and the discussion on the Asia Pacific, how we could collaborate the global issues with the regional issues. This is a point that we need to highlight in our summary report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. This is actually the question I have also for all of you, because it's not just a report that we wrote, but it is really collective collaboration effort, a collaborative effort that we have. But the point is that we would like to use this also as inspiration, because this is first time that in Asia Pacific we come up with a report of connecting all those three planetary crises. Because I always speak on behalf of local governments here, this is something new for them maybe. They understand about the climate, they understand about pollution, air pollution, they also understand about biodiversity loss. But they don't know that this all can connect actually. So I think this is what I want to say, that this is not just about theory, this is not just about something that we put in the book, but something that we can execute. So I think we all have a role to play here. As national governments, you can come up with a policy of having circular economy in place. This is something that everybody can contribute, especially in the actions or follow-up action. Thank you.
I think I also need to say something because all the distinguished speaker already mentioned local matters. While it depends on the person who work in the front line. And so I totally agree with Daniel-san. And in my case, working for the climate, and the climate side also try to involve the SD, sustainable development measures, or the parameters, or the matters. While health side, so they also try to work together with the mental health or whatever, and try to involve more for the climate matters. So that's also the great chance for all the kind of things. And this report, essentially, firstly, primary user is SCAP, and as already explained by the ministers, also so that would be the great chance to make a flagship, while each person or each local people need to implement, so that national level, local level, regional cooperation, and also each scientist also need taking care of the matters, so that we work in the ground as well. So that's my view. Thank you very much.
Yes, the question was, how were the reports received? One or all three of them? Because we have done three. Yeah, okay. I think that the first one, which was on creating the evidence, I think we got a lot of response, a lot of interest, because I think it was sort of the first time that all this evidence was being organized and presented in a report. When we got to the second one, how do we do this? What kind of policy frameworks? The audience gets a little bit smaller, right? So I think this is something that we should have taken into consideration, especially as we made the dissemination of the report. So we tried to find different ways through going through dissemination through all of our channels, IASA, IGES, and all the Stockholm Environment Institute. And I think in the end, it had a lot of attention, and we were trying to target specifically those intergovernmental processes, so that if we measure were we successful, I think we were, because a lot of them took them on, with the help of everyone, by the way, UNEA, the COP30, all of these, and I think all of that comes from the second report. And then the third report was on quantification, and that one was a little bit more obscure for people. And as I said, that was the first of what we hope is a continuation of our work on quantifying. It was a little bit more technical in terms of, modeling and how do we do this? Is this really correct? I mean, can you really come to these conclusions when there's really no data. So I think that we try to really put that in our report, that you can actually, that today you have some very good modeling tools, that by doing inferences, you can come up with some really, really close approximations. So I think that what we did not do perhaps in the study was to emphasize that we were not trying to project or to say this is what's going to happen in the future, but rather to do an approximation of, if you do this, you're going to have almost 30% of cost savings. To me, that's shocking. But somehow I was expecting a bigger, wow, but so far not. And I think it has to do a lot with our presentation. And we hope to refine that in the future. And we're talking about that, not only how to continue our work, but now to focus on implementation. I mean, how do we reach the right audiences so that those audiences, particularly the policy and decision makers, and not just government, but remember, decision makers are also the private sector, NGOs, philanthropic organizations, you name it, youth groups. How can we make our reports much more understandable so that they can be immediately accessible to all these various audiences so that they can use them in practice? I hope I answered your question, because it's good that you ask those questions, because that's going to make us more alert in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think Professor Lewis already gave really good closing to this session. It's clear that the synergistic approaches in the region is in action, but the key question we're facing is how to scale up. And we'll continue this discussion in the next session, so please stay with us. And big thank you to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will now have the second round of expert panel discussion. Welcome back. We will now have the second round of expert panel discussion, moderated by Mr. Sang-Min Nam, Director of the Environment Development Division at SGAP. This panel looks at how of synergistic solutions, focusing on finance, data, and governance. In this session, we have 4 panelists and 2 discussants. Let me first introduce Mr. Ma Jung, Director of the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, who will talk about data and tools. Mr. Ma Jung, please come to the stage. Next, Ms. Rachita Gulati, Research Economist at the Asian Development Bank Institute. Next, Mr. Toru Yoshida, Senior Deputy Director at JICA, providing perspectives on finance. And Ms. Cyrine Merkpour, Associate Professor at Monash University, talking about the critical role of governance. And after hearing from these panelists, we will have 2 discussants. The first one will be Mr. Luis Gomez Echeverri. He already spoke earlier, as you know. And then Ms. Muskan Lamba, representative major group for children and youth. And now, Mr. Sang-Min Nam, please take it.
Thank you, Nobuya-san. Good afternoon. I guess you are really hoping to have a relaxing time after this session. So just stay with us for next 1 hour. And so earlier session, we had a very interesting presentation on nature, climate change, circular economy, and cities. And all presentations were highlighting those points of synergistic approaches, starting with the nexus approaches. But without means of implementation, here we are talking about the data, governance, and finance. We cannot really address those points of interconnection or synergistic approaches. So data can generate our knowledge, understanding on the interconnected points, synergistic points. And governance bring those stakeholders together. Many cases we know that those issues connecting across ministries, across organizations, it can be issue for everybody, but at the end, it can be issue for nobody. So that's why governance is important to really bring stakeholders together and then make them accountable. And then finance. Without finance, we cannot really do any work to address those, especially since many synergistic points are currently outside ministries or organizations, so outside the current hierarchy system. Finance is important to provide a strong incentive for them to move together. So in that regard, so we will have a presentation from those co-authors who is working on those means of implementation chapters. So first, I'm really pleased to invite Mr. Mazun, Director, Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, for his presentation on data and tools.
Thank you, Director Nam, and hello everyone. I'm happy to report the Chapter 7, Data and Tools for SDG Acceleration, it means to unlock synergies in our region. Although I'm assigned to report this, I want to recognize the great work of our co-authors, Pablo and Zhou Xin, and also Mr. Park, Professor Park. This chapter identified 4 critical functions of data and tools. First is to discover thank you. First, it's about the discover interlinkages, map cause and effect relationship between climate pollution and biodiversity and society. And secondly, it's about quantify co-benefits and trade-offs, numerically estimate impacts like public health or job creation. And third is about stimulate and optimize test alternative policy packages and long-term pathways under uncertainty. Last but not least, it's about empower stakeholders. Today I heard many times about the importance of governance. So translate complex findings for public engagement and close data gaps. These are equally important. And in our report, in our report, it's actually recognize the progress made in this region beyond 2015. We noted the shift from intuition-based planning to evidence-based integrated assessment. New tools like SD or IAMs and Nexus tools, all this have been adopted in various parts of the region. Geospatial technology development really help to enable much higher quality decision making, and citizen science also fill the gap, the data gaps through local initiatives. We're not short of challenges in this region. There's a lack of timely disaggregated indicators for the environment and social factors, and the data's kind of existing information often remains to be siloed, fragmented within different ministries or other organizations or agencies. And capacity and resources side, there's a shortage of local expertise who can who know how to run those models, sophisticated models, and there's a lack of sustained financial investments on data infrastructure. And the last, it's about transparency barriers. There's many global south cities struggle with basic level of environmental disclosure. We identify that through our Global City Green and Low Carbon Transparency Index, which we published at the COP30. But the opportunities are even more compelling. Digital innovation actually, can have the great potential to help this region to leapfrog. This is the region where this region is a global leader in digital innovation. So using Internet of Things and cloud computing to bypass traditional data collection hurdles and implement smart real-time monitoring systems, this is happening. And frontier tech, such as AI and machine learning, it has great potential to uncover hidden patterns in large data sets, while geospatial platform and Earth observation data offer unprecedented spatial resolution, and there are many proven best practices of using the data and tools like in Japan, China, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, Mongolia, Palau. We also cited Bangladesh and Sri Lankan cases. Next page. Regional examples, some of them have been highlighted in the report, where I just listed a few of them. In Australia, ISDG, the version 2.0 for national scale policy scenario testing. In South Asia, transboundary water, energy, food nexus, and management in Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna river system. In China, supply chain spillover analysis for forest restoration have been identified, and also replicable model for real-time disclosure. And New Zealand, it's about leader intelligence in marine environment monitoring by citizens. So in summary, there are three key highlights. First is about integrated data and analytical tools are essential for identifying policy synergies across climate, biodiversity, and pollution, and for, of course, accelerating SDG progress. They enable policymakers to review interlinkages and quantify all of this. And the second insight is about if we want to scale up transformative impact, it requires a formal integration of means of implementation, which include finance, technology, capacity building, governance, and partnerships. Last one is about the case studies at national, regional, and global levels demonstrate all these possibilities and citizen science in enhanced evidence-based policy making and inclusive implementation. Last slide, I want to talk about the priority directions and some policy suggestions for action taken on the national level. Invest in data infrastructure is important, and build literacy among the public officials. In the regional level, how to strengthen shared platforms like the Asia-Pacific SDG Gateway. And on the global level, this region should join the global efforts to promote open source the data standards and align with international finance and capacity building standards. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Majun. As you can see from his presentation, the chapter is looking at the critical value of data and tools, and also new tools and for leapfrogging, monitoring, and also new technology available, including geospatial data and also synergy tools, the specific cases, and also the summary on integrated data and analytical tools and scaling. So we have received a few questions, but we will have a Q&A session after all the presentation. And our next speaker is Ms. Rachida Gulati, research economist from Asian Development Bank. We'll speak about the finance.
Thank you so much, Chair, and the organizers for having me here. So first of all, I would like to thank all the authors of this chapter and their contributions in drafting this chapter for the report. So in this chapter on finance, we try to address the answer to the key question that how to design and accelerate synergistic financing. So because the key purpose is to understand the innovative financing mechanisms to address the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity, and the pollution in the region. So please move to the next slide. So to particularly reflect on the innovative financing mechanism and understand the synergistic financing approach, the chapter particularly emphasizes on to discuss the targeted approaches to synergistic solutions for adopting the financing, particularly designed financing mechanisms. Synergistic finance, we define in the chapter as therefore as not only to generate the co-benefits, but also to avoid creating the new trade-offs across environmental objectives. When well-structured, it aligns incentives and benefits across governments, investors, communities, and ecosystem. So while reflecting on the specific cases in the chapter, we tried to understand the finance from the two perspectives, finance-driven synergies and the finance-enabling synergies. So how the synergies are being achieved through the different project designs and the structured mechanisms. So when we reflect on the finance-driven synergies, we try to emphasize on the financing mechanism wherein the synergies could be achieved through the financing mechanism based on its structure, incentives, and regulatory requirements, directly creating the co-benefits. And we reflect on, the chapter reflects on some examples through the case studies already in place and as well as which could be designed in a way to bring in the certain required actions. So the examples to achieve the regulatory through the regulatory mandates, sovereign green bonds, carbon pricing, and the risk sharing structures. So the second aspect which the chapter reflects on is the finance enabling synergies, wherein the financing mechanism is being provides the capital and enables the multi-stakeholders coordination, but also co-benefits which particularly arises from the integrated project designs rather than the mechanism itself. So this provides the examples of the bilateral ODAs, concessional loans for the integrated projects. Next slide, please. So the chapter reflects on the financial landscapes and the present situation of the financing in the different, across the globally as well as in the region. So global climate finance has, if we reflect on some statistics here, the global climate finance has more than doubled up from the 812 billions in 2018 to USD 1.9 trillions in 2023. Annual need to meet the Paris Agreement requirements, 4.1 trillions by 2030. Asia Pacific needs is approximately USD 1.1 to 1.7 trillion. to meet the climate commitments and biodiversity-related development. And lastly, the biodiversity-related finance, if we look at it, it has reached less than 2%, representing the sphere under funding. So reflecting on the climate finance by region, so East Asia, particularly the China, it receives the most, while the other regions, South Asia, it's overall the funding is around 9%. Then in the Central and the West Asia, it's 5.5, and the Southeast Asia, it's 5.3, where the Pacific is severely underrepresented in the allocations. So the next slide, please. So the chapter further talks about the approaches to achieve the synergistic, approaches towards the financing mechanisms to achieve the synergies. So it talks about to understand that how different financing modalities can derive the synergistic outcomes. It discusses the different approaches, particularly the public, private, and the blended finance mechanism, and how it is being entering and could enter, along with the reflection on some examples and case studies where we try to integrate and understand that how the financing mechanism through its project designs or the capital and is generating the benefit, creating the benefit, co-benefits. So reflecting on a bit on the different approaches, so the public finance serve as a foundational layer as being discussed in the study, and encompassing the several alternatives through which the public finance mechanisms are prevailing. Sovereign green funds, one of the example of the sovereign green funds is the Sharia compliance to 6 bonds in Indonesia. Then climate budget tagging. Some countries are already moving ahead towards the climate budget tagging, especially in the Indonesia, and as well as the Philippines and Vietnam are also moving in the similar directions. Role of the development financial institutions like the China Development Bank, State Bank of India, Korea Development Bank. This could have also a leverage to achieve the financing mechanism from the public institutions. So these instruments particularly signals the government's commitment and creating the enabling environments for broader investment flows. ODA grants and the green public procurement further demonstrates how fiscal policy can be aligned with climate objectives. Second is the approach which is discussed in the chapter is on the private finance, which represents the scaling up mechanism, particularly because the public finance may not be sufficient enough to unlock the benefits. So the private finance need to enter and to scale up the private financing, and to leverage the private finance. Some instruments which are already which needs to work up is the ESG investments, green and the sustainability linked bonds, and carbon markets, biodiversity credits. Natural capital investing is emerging as another frontier area through the regulatory framework, and standardized metrics remain a challenge for the region. But however, there is a risk-return gap. To mitigate that, the blended finance, there's a need to blended finance can bridge this gap by combining the concessional funds with the private capital. So instruments in this direction, like the instruments like guarantees, the funded layer structures through the MDBs, and the bilateral donors, ZICA, AFD, are critical for de-risking the investments. And the philanthropic foundations could also play a significant role in pushing the blended finance. So on the left-hand side, you could see some reflection on the cases and the examples that the chapter highlights. So these are a few of the examples that I could able to bring in here for the discussion, but chapter reflects few more additional examples. So we have the examples based on the two aspects, finance-driven synergies and the finance-enabling synergies. So among the cases, the Fiji's example of the financial system transformation for the climate resilience, where the FISI system has actually reflects on the regulatory mandates which created the domestic capital mobilization for renewable energy, and also tried to link the domestic mobilization, the bonds, sovereign bonds, with the to catalyze the private investments without direct public spending. Besides this, there are the case studies that relates to the enabling synergy finance mechanism, where the project design has actually helped in the enabling the synergies. So that example involves one of the example that relates to Tamil Nadu and Vietnam. So Yoshida-san will be reflecting in more detail how these funding through the ODA loans and the bilateral ODAs has actually helped in achieving the synergies through the financing mechanisms. So next slide, please. So finally, the chapter provides the key recommendations that how the financing mechanism can help, how the financing could work and bring in the synergies. So we tried to provide the targeted recommendations in the chapter, wherein the particularly that what kind of the actions that are required by individual countries, and wherein the regional corporation and the development partners can come forward to implement the actions to achieve the synergistic solutions. So for individual countries, as the other chapter authors are also discussing, some of the commonalities are there, but in a way that how it has to be considered is different in terms of achieving the objectives for by making the accurate use of the finance. So policy coherence and coordination is important. Market development incentives are important, especially in case when we are talking about the finance. Financing mechanism by linking the carbon pricing with the environmental objectives, scaling up performance-based finance is important. And the data infrastructure as the data, because the lack of the data and the accessible indicators sometimes leads to the hindrance to understand what is actually the present situation. So there's a need to invest on the national statistical capacity for granular emissions, for attaining the accurate data on the emissions, biodiversity, and pollution. Then for regional cooperation, regional learning, and the harmonized taxonomy, although somehow in the Southeast Asian taxonomy is working well, but in the other regions, the similar kind of provisions are actually lacking, so which could be the one another scope. And lastly, the development partners, they could help in the capacity development, and particularly in the training the officials and the financial institution staff to design, evaluate, and manage the multi-benefit projects, assign the specified technical units in the ministries, and develop the pilot projects in the nature-based solutions, sustainable agriculture, and the climate resilient infrastructure. Finally, for the scaling up of the blended finance, what is required is to collaborate with the development partners to deploy the guarantees, concessional finance, and the layered fund structures to de-risk the investments, strengthen projects' bankability through incentives such as the ADB's Asia Pacific Project Preparation Facility and provide the TAs, technical assistance to building the enabling environments and attract the private capital. So what is the pathway to the synergistic finance? As the fragmentation is the barrier, the mechanism design is the lever which could push it further. Regional cases can prove the viability, and the examples and action which is required is now we are discussing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachida. Elaborating the term of finance-driven synergies, finance-enabling synergies, and also those specific cases of a public-private blended finance, and then 8 recommendations for country level, for regional cooperation, and also multilateral partners. And we have also 4 pathways towards that. So now we are moving on to another next presentation on also finances. Mr. Toru Yoshida, who is a Senior Deputy Director, Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Toru Yoshida from JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency. Speaking on behalf of Mr. Kyosuke Inada, who serves as co-lead author representing JICA for Chapter 6 and is regrettably unable to attend today, I am honored to take part in this panel discussion. Let me begin by briefly introducing JICA's sustainability policy, which was announced in October 2023, because the policy includes the focus areas related to synergetic responses to the triple planetary crisis, which form an essential foundation for today's discussion. This policy guides how JICA integrates climate action, biodiversity, and sustainability across all of its operations. Importantly, JICA does not only design policies. We also finance synergetic actions through a wide range of development cooperation instruments. These include ODA concessional loans, private sector investment and finance, and technical cooperation, which together enable JICA to support climate-aligned and nature-positive development at scale. Under this policy, JICA aims to ensure that all new projects are aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement. This involves mitigation, adaptation, and supporting a whole society transition in developing countries. JICA also strengthens its commitment to nature conservation and biodiversity mainstreaming and aims to achieve organizational carbon neutrality by 2030. Through the vision of leading the world with trust, JICA ultimately seeks to contribute to a sustainable world where the economy, society, and environment are in harmony. This is the foundational context for the synergies and financing approaches presented in Chapter 6 of the report. Next slide, please. Here is an example how JICA finances synergies in practice, which is enabling finance, as was described by Rajita-san previously. The Tamil Nadu Biodiversity Conservation and Greening Project for Climate Change Response in India is supported through JICA's ODA loan financing, combined with technical cooperation inputs. This project simultaneously advances climate resilience, biodiversity conservation, and community development by protecting forest ecosystem and wildlife, improving forest product value chains, supporting the participation of women and vulnerable groups, and strengthening the Tamil Nadu Forest Department. This illustrates how JICA uses its financing tools to climate triple win outcomes for climate, nature, and development. Next slide, please. The next example shows how JICA finances synergies between pollution control and development. The Waste to Energy and Waste Treatment project in Binh Duong province in Vietnam is also supported through ODA loan financing, complemented by capacity building support. The project contributes to advancing the local circular economy, improving urban environmental hygiene, and promoting sustainable economic growth. This demonstrates how JICA's financing, whether through ODA loans, private sector investment and finance, or technical cooperation, enables environmental measures to produce substantial development co-benefits. These examples reflect the core message of Chapter 6 of the Asia-Pacific Synergy Report. Financing mechanisms play a critical role in scaling up synergetic actions across climate, biodiversity, and pollution challenges. For JICA, given that approximately 67% of total project volume is concentrated in the Asia-Pacific region, this area is of critical importance to JICA. Pursuing climate action and pursuing development are not competing priorities. They are mutually reinforcing. And JICA's role is to make that synergy possible by providing long-term, concessional, and knowledge-based financing that turns transition goals into real, tangible results. As the Chapter 6 highlights, finance is one of the key means of implementation, enabling countries and stakeholders to move from fragmented, sector-specific actions to truly integrated and synergistic solutions across climate, biodiversity, pollution, and the SDGs. Moreover, business and private capital are essential drivers of transformational change, reinforcing that public resources alone cannot meet the scale of investment required. Therefore, mobilizing finance, both public and private, is fundamental to scaling impactful synergies and accelerating sustainable development throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Against this backdrop, JICA is committed to being an enabler of sustainable transitions, ensuring that climate resilient, nature positive, and inclusive growth happen together, not separately. I stop here and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Yoshida-san, for presenting these concrete cases from JICA. As our first presentation, when we start this session, I guess you were informed that this report will have over 100 cases. This report is not only for analysis and recommendation, but this will also showcase various, concrete examples, because at the end, we need this kind of clear evidences that synergistic approaches work. So we are aiming to provide such cases. So if you have any other cases that you can, you wish to share, please share with our IGES colleague so that we can incorporate it into the report and the database. And our next speaker will be Ms. Shirin Malekpo, Associate Professor, Monash University, Australia, on governance.
Thanks. Appreciate it. And like other chapters, I also emphasize that I'm presenting the work on the governance chapter on behalf of a range of colleagues, a couple of whom are here in the room with us, Professor Wangshin Lee and Miki Fukuda, and others are either online or not present today. I think perhaps you might have heard from all the previous presentations, even the previous panel where they were talking about chapters on the entry points for synergistic solutions, such as circular economy, biodiversity, health, etc. The word governance keeps coming up over and over again, and the importance of governance is emphasized. And the reason is really that we really look at governance as the operating system for managing synergies. And this is really about being able to share a common vision among different stakeholders, different policy actors, coordinate action across different levels of government, but also different sectors of the society, setting up mandates, incentive mechanisms, and accountability and compliance mechanisms, really, that can also help with effective allocation of resources for synergistic solutions. So governance is really the operating system that brings all these different threads together, and therefore it is very critical. In the Asia-Pacific region, we really have a diversity of contexts. We probably have that diversity in other parts of the world as well, but in the Asia-Pacific, I would argue that we probably have even stronger diversity or more intense diversity. If you look at even something like population, we have a country like India with over 1 billion population, and then also we have small island countries with a few 100,000 max population. This really means that the modes of governance that exist and can work effectively in different countries are really different, and also the types of challenges for mainstreaming synergistic approaches through governance could be very different in these contexts. What we are presenting in the governance chapter is really this framework, and I have only this one slide that I'm going to emphasize and want you to take away from this chapter. We really argue that, again, because of the diversity that I talked about, but also really in reality, the level of ambitions that might exist among policymakers and key actors in these different countries and different sectors and different settings that we face in the Asia-Pacific region. A prescriptive approach to governance, or how can you govern for synergies, is not a simple, straightforward answer, and a prescriptive answer will not work. What we really need is a mix of strategies, a mix of frameworks and tools that can then be adopted by different societal actors in different settings based on their current conditions, the realities that they're facing on the ground, but also their level of ambition. Where do they want to get next? And this framework, where we call it a synergistic governance framework, aims to do that. It basically says that you can work at 3 different levels of impact, if you like. At the tactical level, you are really looking at niche experimentation type projects. You're looking at pilots. This works really effectively in cases where the kind of more central coordination and political will might not be readily present, and there is a need for proof of concept to be built first. Where collaboration and coordination across different sectors is very limited, but then you could have a champion sector who actually put their hand up and say, we're going to develop a pilot, we're going to develop an experimentation, a living lab, if you like, whatever you call it, in order to really create a case that synergies can work. And I would argue that actually the Asia-Pacific region is not short of these examples. We see many of these examples in different sectors in the Asia-Pacific region. Examples of a lot of food, water, energy nexus initiatives, for example, that exist. A lot of nature-based solutions that are often championed by the water sector, for example, in one country, or different approaches that you might see that are really delivering those local benefits in a very controlled environment, if you like, in a particular setting. At a higher level of impact, you can think about more strategic governance interventions. And this is where you try to formalize partnerships and collaborations and coordination mechanisms. This is where there is already an appreciation and understanding of the net positive trade-offs for doing business as usual, and also the benefits of synergistic approaches, when there is often some proof of concept that exists, and also there is some stakeholder buy-in and political buy-in in order to form some multi-stakeholder partnerships and try to formalize, to some extent, the synergistic approaches. And there are examples of this already also in the Asia-Pacific, perhaps not as much as we have with or not as many as we have with the more tactical cases, but there are examples of this. In India, for example, the National Clean Air Initiative tries to do that by bringing together some central ministries across waste, agriculture, manufacturing, and environment, to really look at transport, to really look at how we can organize across different ministries in order to achieve a common goal around minimizing air pollution, but with really managing these different sectors in a different way and creating some co-benefits also across these different sectors. In Indonesia, there is also an example of the government of Indonesia really helping to, having set up in the past few years, governance bodies and coordinating platforms for managing synergies across different sectors. So rather than going with more of the siloed approach to managing the different SDGs or assigning different SDGs to different ministries, but trying to create a platform to coordinate these actions. across different sectors. So there are examples of that also available. And finally, at the more transformative level of impact, this is where you see really the institutionalization, you see the embedding of synergistic approaches into legal frameworks and becoming the new normal, if you like, or the way things are done in a sector or in multiple sectors or as a whole of government approach. This is where you really need strong incentive mechanisms to be put in place and often a good coordination between top-down approaches and bottom-up approaches in order to make a transformative governance work. And an example of this might be in New Zealand, where they have granted legal personhood to ecosystems, to rivers, for example, aligned with all the debates around the right of nature. It really allows different ministries, but also different sectors, including private sector, public sector, community, and civil society organizations to really work collaboratively in order to really value and protect the rights of the nature in New Zealand. So that could be considered as something that comes as close as possible to a transformative way of managing synergies between different actors and different sectors. And in different settings, you might go really with trying to, when there is strong political buy-in, central coordination available, you can start from the top down and try to also coordinate all the bottom-up approaches and set up even experimentations and bottom-up approaches in order to very well align with that top-down approach. Or in other contexts, you might actually start from the bottom-up and then aim for getting buy-in and providing proof of concept for more top-down approaches. And it is really, I would argue, that it's not a linear process. It's a messy effort and also requires a lot of iterations and reiterations to get it right in most contexts. And finally, I want to just emphasize that governance for synergies or synergistic governance really requires a whole lot of capacities. And often when we talk about capacities and capacity building, there is of course this notion of, you know, with the aim of, you know, developing countries, investment in their capacities in order to get projects off the ground, often driven by developed countries or international regional bodies, etc. I would say that capacities for transformative governance are lacking in developed countries as much as they're lacking in developing countries. So really, we need a bit of a broader definition of capacity building, perhaps, that really allows for transformative capacities across all countries with different resource settings and different challenges. And I think, of course, there is a role to play for international and development partners and regional bodies to help really facilitate that. But I would encourage a bit of a different perspective of this notion of capacity building for synergies. I finish here.
Thank you, Professor Maleko. Professor Maleko was highlighting not only these three layers of synergistic governance, but you know, at the end, so this report is not just for report to inform academic community and others about the synergistic approaches, but this will be kind of stepping stone or operational manual, borrowing the term from Eric. He mentioned this operational manual to facilitate regional and multilateral cooperation. In this regard, her point, capacity building for synergistic governance, it's not necessarily for only, you know, capacity can be provided by developed countries, but we have many cases from developing countries. So capacity building exercise for synergistic governance will bring many developing countries also as a source of knowledges and practice. Yeah, perhaps we may create a different dynamics of a capacity building exercise at the regional level. So hoping that this can be well elaborated in the report so that we can really utilize this as a operational manual for synergistic approaches at the regional level. And now we will move on to our discussant, Dr. Luis.
Yes.
And when you were presenting earlier session, you were highlighting multiple barriers, like knowledge barrier, economic barrier, political barriers. But your main point was about fragmentation of governance or finance. Yeah? So you mentioned this as a really enemy of synergies. So now you have listened to also synergistic approaches in governance, finance, and data and tools. So, and then we will have this also meeting on 25th. So this is also, while it is public event for us, it is also important process for crystallizing our own ideas. So perhaps in that regard, what would be your further thoughts on this? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's difficult to talk about means of implementation and to add anything that has already been said by the excellent presentations. So I will try to add a sort of a different, not a different way of looking at it, but a different perspective that will summarize a little bit. And I think that the thing that comes out not only from these presentations, but from looking at the excellent slide that you have on the long term, the medium term, and the tactical is that there is a great need for simplification. One of the experiences that we have had, and that was to answer your question too, to our reports, is that this is so complicated. That's a little bit and of course I read the report of Asia Pacific, and it's dense, but and also complicated, technical. But what is different from ours is that you have, how many case studies do you present? Over 100? This, to me, is the wealth of this report, and something that I'm going to try to promote in the other regions, in Africa and in Latin America, is that we do the same, so that people can immediately see, that's what you're talking about. And this is the application. And how do you get to that? Through means of implementation that allow you to get there. And this is what the case studies are so good. So that was one sort of conclusion that I wanted to bring out just from listening to this presentation now and this morning. The second one is on capacities. We really have a challenge that I don't think, I mean, we know it, but I don't think people realize that when they talk about synergies and that we really don't have sufficient capacity, especially in the developing countries, and the sophistication to access some of these tools, to use them and to apply them so that you can make recommendations to policymakers. And again, I think that was mentioned also almost by every one of the speakers now and also earlier today. And then the third is the just making things accessible. Accessibility, and it seems like when I started mentioning, in our reports about this, people really said yes, but that's a given. I mean, what is exactly the problem? Well, the problem has already been mentioned here. It's on data, by Mr. Majun, very, very good explaining that you know, if we don't target these tools of data and finance, we are going to miss our task. But the trick, as we talk of means of implementation, is how do we make that data and tools and knowledge more accessible, and that part we haven't spent so much time in it, because, and you know, when we talked about this in our reports, the reaction that I always got, because being from my institution where I was from, that's what we focus on, is on data, knowledge, tools, and the answer was, there's data everywhere. I mean, what are we talking about? There's, you know, you go to ChatGPT and there are 10 pages of tools that, but try to have policymakers try to access these tools. It's not easy. Many of these tools, as I mentioned this morning, are use very different methodologies. Many of the models, and I come from an institution where that's what we do, modeling. The modeling has different bases and different conditions for different recommendations, and there's a bit of confusion in terms of how do we provide easier access. And one of our recommendations was platform. Can we have, and I think one of the mentions today was, can we not create a regional platform, not only for data and finance, but I mean for data and tools, but also for case studies, because case studies show you not only what worked. The thing that is missing in the report is what didn't work. But of course, you don't want to. The report is already long enough. But it's equally, if you created a platform, then one could go into some of the case studies about this didn't work because of this, and to me, we can learn so much from that is incredible. So it's building capacities, making access and accessibility easier, and in the area of finance, of course. By the way, the chapter on finance, which I was given the responsibility of being one of the reviewers, is excellent. Excellent. I think that as a means of implementation, you know, I think it was covered already this morning. All across the SDGs, the main means of implementation is where does the finance come from? And what happens is that, and I already mentioned it in my presentation earlier, is that the area of finance has a lot of shortcomings, and of course we mentioned which are the ones that we can advance: the blended finance, the public finance, the private finance. But what is not mentioned as much, and I think that's the main barrier to implementation, is the shortcomings in how much finance, where is it going, how we do access it, and what is missing. Like, for example, one of the things that is always missing, we just prepare a report in our Synergies, is the area of risk and insurance. And it's covered in this report somewhat, but we actually came up with one full thematic report, because we felt that in the finance discussions that are going on in the UN.
Luisa, would you wrap up? And we have a few questions for our panelists. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the insurance and risk is hardly mentioned, and I don't want to say that this is why, but maybe it's, this is where the underprivileged, the most affected, the people in the developing countries where they don't really appear as much in the maps, and I attribute that to in part. So it's a natural outcome of we deal with statistics, we deal with the overall, and when we get to the very specific, we miss some of the things. So again, I think is trying to see in the midst of implementation how do we create tools that actually reach everyone, that help to promote synergies without creating a counterproductive counterproductive effects, which sometimes, and I think your report and our reports have made it very specific that it's not just taking action. And again, that was another reaction to our reports. Answering your question again is, there is already a lot of action out there, but what we made clear in our reports, and I think it comes out in yours too, is that it's not just doing that in synergistic action, and synergistic is different from integrated.
Can we wrap up?
Huh?
I have to conclude.
Oh, I see. Okay. That sorry. That we need to make sure. Anyway, but the graph in the back is really something that we created, and I won't spend more than 45 seconds on that. Is that we had talking about the means of implementation, we came up with how do we do a overall framework that to do what it is that we want to do, which are the levers and which are the entry points. I don't want to go through it because for the matter of time, but again, it was trying to find a way to simplify and to create, and from that going into the more detailed specifics of the means of implementation. With that, I stop. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we got 4 questions from online participants. Currently, we have 50 participants joining online, in addition to those in-person participants. So I think your advice is, should we go through all the questions, or no, we don't have time for that. Thank you for sharing your question, but I hope you have already figured out the answer during these presentations and interventions. So we will move on to next speaker, who is representing the youth group. Again, Mr. Muskan. Yeah, so make a brief point on this.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm Muskan Lamba, youth advocate and researcher, and I'm representing the major group for children and youth. I want to share some recommendations for practical implementation of the report from a youth and lived experience lens. I see at least 3 underexplored possibilities: subnational youth governance, planning for compounded stress rather than single risks, and treating our collective emotional and social capacities as part of infrastructure. We know that Asia Pacific is the youngest region in the world, and young people operate naturally across several silos: climate, health, livelihoods, education, digital spaces. So we are uniquely situated to for integrated implementation, and we are also crucial policy actors in so many countries in Asia Pacific. I invite everyone in the room to tap into our diverse communities and people power. For that, I'm sharing 7 quick recommendations from my experiences working with youth peers on all global, national, and local levels. First, treat youth as implementers and innovators, not just stakeholders. Most frameworks still position youth as beneficiaries or consultees. Implementation requires a shift towards youth-led and lived experience-led pilots embedded inside national and subnational programs, because we tend to bring creative approaches, especially when it comes to scarce resources. This includes ring-fenced funding windows within climate, biodiversity, urban, and pollution programs for youth-designed delivery models. Also, multi-year support from 3 to 5 years as opposed to short-term grants, because trust and behavioral change uptake takes time. Second, while seeing cities and districts as learning labs for integrated SDG action, feeding lessons upward into national policy, a youth-informed lens could be important in prioritizing municipal and provincial pilots where youth councils, student unions, and community collectives already engage with topics of transport, waste, water, and heat action plans. Third, integrating experience-based indicators into SDG monitoring. What this looks like is integrated aspects of perceived safety, dignity, stress, trust in institutions, and a sense of agency. Fourth, tap into youth networks as real-time data and feedback systems. Across Asia-Pacific, we have so many youth communities already generating community-level intelligence and case studies, but it's informal and often can be ignored. It is possible to partner with youth groups to act as sentinel networks for things like heat stress, air and water pollution impacts, displacement stress, breakdowns in service access. This also creates potential for lived experience reporting within environmental and health data to guide adaptive governance. Fifth, for communities that are exhausted, burnt out, and experiencing mental health challenges, which I spoke of earlier, it's important to allocate climate, biodiversity, and urban finance to cover things like psychosocial support, peer facilitators, dialogue spaces, and community care infrastructures, and to recognize these as enabling conditions beyond just co-benefits. Sixth, institutionalize lived experience and governance. Create standing youth and lived experience advisory roles within ministries, development banks, regional bodies, and importantly, compensate this expertise and leverage these at design, mid-course correction, feedback, and evaluation stages. Seventh, and quite important, there's a strong need right now to protect civic space as a condition for synergy. Civic spaces are shrinking in many Asia-Pacific contexts. It's important to fund mechanisms that protect youth organizers, support community dialogue, enable dissent without penalty. Without this, multi-stakeholder governance risks becoming performative rather than functional. I hope some of these prove valuable in your planning, and thank you so much again.
Thank you, Muskan. As I informed earlier, so after this preparing the latest draft by April, we will also have opportunity for these stakeholder groups to review and share their comments. So once this is available, we can reach out to youth group for you to mobilize, youth groups to look at and then to share your feedback. But meanwhile, you highlighted those 7 points, that could be also useful for us. So if you could share the text with our team, that would be great. Thank you. So with that, I conclude this session, and please give a round of applause.
Thank you very much to all the panelists and discussants. And we now move to the final wrap-up session. As we conclude this afternoon, rich dialogue, it's time to highlight our key takeaway points, including policy recommendations for the region. To provide our closing remarks, please welcome Mr. Doi Kentaro, Vice Minister, Ministry of the Environment, Japan, and Mr. Sam Min-nam, Director, Environment Development Division, SCAP.
Hello, everyone. I am Doi Kentaro, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs at the Ministry of the Environment of Japan. First, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to each of you for your active participation in today's discussion. Through this event, we gained valuable insight into addressing the triple crisis facing the Asian Pacific region and the importance of synergies in achieving the SDGs. I believe we reaffirmed that synergistic approaches, one that enhance mutual effectiveness rather than operating in silos, are essential for tackling these complex interlinked challenges. The insights and proposals shared today will also be reflected in the Asian Pacific Synergy Report, which we are currently compiling with SCAP, ADB, and others. In the Asian Pacific region we live in, achievement of the SDGs, including environmental targets to be met by 2030, is at serious risk. To make progress towards these goals, actions by a wide range of stakeholders are essential, not only by national and regional, local governments and international development cooperation agencies, but also by businesses and local communities. However, it is not easy to achieve a common understanding across the diverse Asian Pacific, and simple stating that the SDGs and environmental measures are important does not readily translate into action. Therefore, it is essential for practitioners from national and local governments, as well as businesses, to listen to and fully understand the challenges people faced on the ground, then work together through dialogue to develop solutions. This approach allows us to tackle multiple issues at the same time, such as climate change, biodiversity, circular economy, livelihoods, and local economies, generating synergies that create jobs, revitalize communities, and enhance well-being. To move these efforts forward with real momentum, the presence of leaders and planners who can support governments and local communities is indispensable. The Asian Pacific Synergy Report is being developed to serve as a guiding compass for their practical efforts. I hope that policymakers in national and local governments make full use of this report to further advance initiatives that helps resolve the real challenges faced by local communities. In conclusion, I hope the discussions held today become a step forward in creating further synergies for advancing environmental challenges in the Asian Pacific region and achieve the SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Minister Mr. Doi, and also Professor Takeuchi. It is really great to have this partnership for developing this Asia Pacific Synergy Report. As many of our colleagues highlighted, this is not just one report. We are developing an operating manual for synergistic approaches. We are developing a stepping stone for regional cooperation. So in that regard, I'm really, on behalf of SCAP, I am really grateful for your participation and for sharing your insights. And we have still a few more steps to finalize this. In that regard, let me highlight 3 points. First, it is organization. At the end, we can develop great ideas and recommendations, but it is at the end the organization that work on it. Organizations will work on connecting across sectors. But in order to organizations to work on it, we do need a plan or action program. Without strategy or plan or action program, we cannot have a more coordinated approach for any organizations. In that regard, the regional action program that we are going to develop, which will be negotiated by representative of a member state, this will be critical for us to make this report to be really operational manual. And third point is governance. We have mostly discussed about this national governance, but regional governance is also important. Bring countries together and bring stakeholders together. So in order to do so, still we need this kind of a regional framework or plan or action program that can suggest that can create a regional governance. So we are working on it. We have a few months to finalize, and then this report at the end will be launched during Global Synergy Conference to be held on 29-30 June. And then in this building, right after that, we have a 9th Committee on Environmental Development at the ministerial level. In that regard, we continue to count on Vice Minister, your support for mobilizing high-level and minister-level participation from our member state so that we can utilize this committee to enhance our political commitments. And then we will move on implementation of the ideas that you suggested into this report. Thank you for your time and participation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doi and Mr. Saminam. And this concludes the event. Thank you very much for all the speakers, all the participants for making this event a very lively one. Thank you.